Chapter 856. Yilu Jing'an's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly understood Yi Xian's intention. With these bumpy metal particles, the smoothness of the icicle tip would decrease. This would allow him to stand more firmly on it. However, the two of them would constantly change their positions during the fight. Ning Xuema would probably be able to step on the icicles that he embedded with the metal particles and take advantage of it. Perhaps these metal particles had other uses? Yi Xian's murderous aura was extremely heavy. Moreover, his attacks were extremely swift and fierce. Not long after Ning Xuema started fighting with him, she was forced to retreat step by step. She focused on defense and occasionally attacked, but it was useless. She couldn't threaten Yi Xian at all. Everyone below the stage held their breaths as they watched. People like Helian Xiao, Jiyun Huang, and the others secretly broke out in a cold sweat for Ning Xuema. Yi Xian was of the metal attribute. After his hands turned a light gold color, they could cut through gold and jade. His hands were weapons. They were the most domineering weapons. Ning Xuema's main attribute was of the wood attribute. She used a green vine whip. Metal restrained wood. Every time Yi Xian's hands touched her vine whip, he would easily cut off a section. Her whip would occasionally hit him, but it wouldn't even leave a mark. Yi Xian's attribute just happened to restrain Ning Xuema's attribute. His level was also one level higher than hers. In addition, he had more battle experience than Ning Xuema. He was also ruthless and his moves were straightforward. It looked like he was Ning Xuema's nemesis. This time, Ning Xuema was really going to lose. Kiran was so nervous that her scales were standing on end. She was afraid that Master would be distracted and didn't even dare to cheer. Master wouldn't really lose, right? If she lost, she wouldn't be able to take Dizun as her master anymore. This fight was especially long. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed. The two of them still hadn't decided who would win. However, it was strange. Yi Xian seemed to be gaining the upper hand step by step and was forcing Ning Xuema to retreat. However, no matter what, he couldn't break through Ning Xuema's defense. She was like the ocean. No matter how fierce the waves were, she could turn them into nothingness. Her every move was soft and powerful. Her moves seemed slow, but they were smooth and impenetrable. Although Yi Xian's storm-like attacks were powerful, they obviously couldn't last long. After another hour, his attacks gradually slowed down. Now is the time. Ning Xuema's eyes flashed. She suddenly changed moves. She went from defense to offense. Defense. His moves followed a strange path. One person turned into 2 people, and 2 people turned into 4 people. After a short moment, Yi Xian felt that Ning Xuema's shadow was everywhere. What move was this? Yi Xian's eyes widened. He had never seen such a move before. He couldn't tell which one was her real body and which one was her illusory body. This move was something Ning Xuema had learned in the modern era. Her inspiration came from anime and manga. It was inspired by anime and was considered a type of shadow clone jutsu. Actually, it wasn't a real clone. It was just that she moved too fast, so the human eye had a temporary visual lag. When her speed reached a certain level and she took a specific route, it felt like one person had transformed into countless people. Yi Xian was dizzy from her clones and his eyes darkened. Yi Xian watched as one of her figures landed on the icicle he had embedded with metal particles. He flicked his finger. The icicle under the figure suddenly exploded. Countless metal particles bounced up and flew toward the figure that landed on it. Master, be careful. Kiran shouted in fear. Chapter 857. Poof. When the metal particles hit the person instantly disappeared. However, a green light flew over and all the metal particles hit the green light. Yi Xian decided to detonate all the icicles he stepped on, and the metal particles shot toward all the Ning Xuema figures. He didn't believe that all the icicles he shot at were illusions. As long as one of them was real, he would win. Poof poof poof. The metal particles filled the air and danced in the air. It was a spectacular sight. Countless of Ning Xuema's clones were smashed to pieces by the metal particles. However, the green vine whip continued to revolve around her, blocking all of the metal particles. Finally, there was one Ning Xuema figure on the icicles. In the end, all the icicles embedded with the metal particles were detonated by Yi Xian, and he destroyed half of the icicle arena. Detonating the icicles to release the metal particles also consumed a lot of mental strength, so Yi Xian was a bit out of breath. You're done detonating? Ning Xuema smiled as she held the trembling green vine whip. Yi Xian looked up abruptly and saw the girl across from him smiling nonchalantly like a blooming flower. She shook the whip. The whip was embedded with countless metal particles, and the original green vine whip became a bumpy metal whip. Your treasures are pretty good, but I don't dare to take them. I'll return them to you. Ning Xuema gripped the whip in her hand and abruptly swung it. Countless metal particles shot back at Yi Xian like a heavenly maiden scattering flowers. Yi Xian had detonated them one by one, so the metal particles weren't concentrated when they attacked Ning Xuema. However, Ning Xuema had detonated them all at once. The thousands of metal particles were like thousands of hidden weapons and were as dense as hornets as they surrounded Yi Xian from head to toe. Nice. Kirin cheered loudly from below. Master's method of giving someone a taste of their own medicine was well used. Yi Xian was also shocked. As a metal type, he wasn't afraid of wood-type weapons, but Ning Xuema had hit back with his own metal-type hidden weapons. When a metal element met a metal element, one would still be injured if they were hit. He was also a character. His hands danced like a whirlwind, slapping away the incoming metal particles and catching them. Even so, he was still hit in several non-vital areas of his body, and it was burning with pain. He took a deep breath. It didn't matter. The place where he was shot wouldn't affect the fight. He could still continue fighting. Just as he was about to charge forward again, he suddenly felt a strange numbness and itchiness in all the places where the metal particles were. The numbness and itchiness were bone-piercing, causing his legs to go soft and he staggered. Coincidentally, Ning Xuema's whip flew over, wrapped around his waist and flung him out. Farewell, I won't see you off. Yi Xian stumbled on the ground and steadied himself. The numbness and itchiness on his body finally disappeared. He was safe and sound, but he had also lost. The spectating crowd was silent for a moment before erupting into cheers again for Ning Xuema's victory. However, Yi Xian looked up at the young girl standing on the icicle with a conflicted gaze. He knew that the metal particles that Ning Xuema had just shot back at him were poisonous, but the poison only had the effect of numbing and itching for a moment. It didn't actually hurt him. Also, she hadn't been unscrupulous when she attacked. At the very least, she hadn't whipped him off the icicle and allowed him to land safely so he wouldn't embarrass himself too much. Yi Xian had killed his way out on the battlefield, so every time he attacked, he didn't leave any way out for his opponent. Chapter 858. It was the same when he fought with Ning Xuema just now. He'd already done his best, but he was still defeated by her. Yi Xian accepted his defeat wholeheartedly and also felt a faint sense of gratitude toward Ning Xuema. He cupped his hands in salute. Thank you. Ning Xuema smiled at this lone wolf-like youth and also cupped her hands in salute. Thank you for letting me win. At this time, the other two teams had also decided the victor. As expected, Helian Xiao and Feng Jiesen each defeated their opponents and won. After going through this round of fierce battles, all three of them were very tired. However, according to the rules, the first place had to be decided among the three of them. That way it would be convenient for the venerable emperor to accept disciples. The three of them still drew lots to determine the order in which they would go on stage. At this time, the two people who went on stage first would be at a disadvantage. The one who lost would be fine, but the one who won and stayed on stage would have to fight the third person, and the third person would have a big advantage because they could rest a little longer. So when Ning Xuema drew the lot that would determine her battle with Helian Xiao first, she couldn't help but curse bitterly in her heart. God was her stepmother and had never treated her well. Feng Jiesen was secretly pleased. She took a step back and leisurely watched the two people fight first. The stars in the sky were resplendent, and the crescent moon was like a hook. The crowd watching the battle was on the ground. It was already late, but no one had left. On the arena of icicles, Helian Xiao stood against the wind and looked at Ning Xuema. Xuema, I'm sorry. I will do my best in this battle. I won't give in. Ning Xuema smiled slightly. I won't either. When competing in the arena, giving one's all is the greatest respect to one's opponent. Helian Xiao was relieved, and a trace of appreciation appeared in his eyes. Thank you. This was a true opponent. A true opponent. Even if they called each other brothers outside the arena, they were opponents once they entered the arena. Everyone would do their best. No matter who won or lost, there would be no regrets. The two of them began to fight on stage. Helian Xiao had dual spirit roots of wood and water. Wood was the main attribute, and water was the secondary attribute. Ning Xuema, on the other hand, had wood and fire dual spiritual roots. Wood was the main attribute, and fire was the secondary attribute. The two of them had the same main attributes, so this battle was very interesting to watch. Although they were both of the wood attribute, Helian Xiao's telekinesis was at the 5th level of the Earth realm, a full 3 levels higher than Ning Xuema. Don't look down on these 3 levels. Once they started fighting, the difference in power would be huge. For example, Helian Xiao could casually condense green vine whips and ebony sticks. He could even make the green vines grow rapidly and quickly form a net to envelop people. In short, he could easily use anything related to wood. On the other hand, Ning Xuema had an Earth rank level 2 attribute, so the things she could casually condense were very limited. He could only form vine whips and wooden sticks, but not countless green vines at the same time. In this way she would be at a disadvantage in the fight. If it was someone else who had Earth tier telekinesis level 2 or level 5, they would have no chance of winning. They would be PK'd in a matter of minutes. They would not be a match at all. On the other hand, Ning Xuemo relied on her peculiar movements and moves to turn danger into safety time and time again. Although there were many people watching the battle below the arena, no one made any noise. They all held their breaths and watched the battle between the geniuses on stage. At this time, no matter if it was Ning Xuema or Helian Xiao, both of them had brought out all their skills, dazzling those experts who were watching the battle. Feng Jiasen also stood below the arena and watched attentively. She was looking for the weaknesses of these two people's movements and tactics. Chapter 859. This was the advantage of making a move later. She could observe her opponent's fight to her heart's content to search for her opponent's weakness. When it was her turn to make a move, she would have a clear idea of what to do. Feng Jiasen's main focus was still on Ning Xuema. She was most afraid of her, and the one she hated the most to step on was her. After an hour, Feng Jiasen became more and more alarmed as she watched. She had already seen Ning Xuema's moves so many times, but she still couldn't find the pattern of her opponent's moves. It was ethereal, strange, and ever-changing. She had already made her move, but you couldn't guess what her next move would be. Although her psychokinesis was Earth Stage Level 2, she could display the power of Earth Stage Level 3 or 4. Moreover, the more she used it, the more abnormal her intuition was. In addition to her strange way of using it, it was simply impossible to guard against. Helian Zhao's psychokinesis was so high, but he was only evenly matched with her and didn't gain the upper hand. Looking at Ning Xuema's moves, Feng Jiasen's heart was beating like a drum. She originally thought that when she almost lost to Ning Xuema when she was flying across Lotus Leaf Lake, it was because the other party just happened to know the layout of those lotus leaves, so she ran fast. If they really fought, Ning Xuema's actual ability might not be that strong. She might not lose to her. Now it seemed that even if she went up on stage and fought with her, she might not win. It could be said that there was an 80 to 90% chance that she would lose to her. If she lost to her again, Feng Jiasen couldn't imagine it. This was a result she absolutely couldn't accept. So no matter what method she used, she had to win. She must win. Her fingers clenched the pill hidden in her sleeve and her eyes drooped. She would take this pill at the most crucial moment. Fight for a chance. Time slipped by as Ning Xuema and Helian Xiao fought, and then slipped by. Both of them made strange moves and brilliant moves. From time to time, there would be applause and comments from the audience. Although it was already late at night, the Star Brilliant stage was still bustling. This fierce fight lasted for more than 4 hours. Converting it to the current time, it was a full 5 hours. Until the next day at 1 a.m., the two finally decided the winner. Helian Xiao was defeated by a single move and leaped off the arena. When he landed on the ground, he staggered a little before regaining his footing and laughing heartily. Haha, this is great. How satisfying. I haven't fought to my heart's content in a long time. Then he cupped his fists towards Ning Xuema on the stage. Xuema, I admit defeat to you. After fighting for so long, he was really tired. He walked 2 steps and sat down on a big rock beside him. He didn't want to get up again. It was clearly the beginning of winter, but he was drenched in sweat, and his forehead was sweating profusely. He wiped his face with his hand and looked at Ning Xuema on the stage. He was worried about her. After such a fight, a man like him was already so tired that his legs were weak and numb. Ning Xuema, a delicate little girl, must be even more tired, and she still had to fight Feng Jiasen. Ning Xuema was at a disadvantage. On the contrary, Feng Jiasen, that white lotus, took advantage of it. Ning Xuema was indeed tired, but more importantly she was also hungry. After such a large amount of activity, she was so hungry that her chest was sticking to her back. But luckily she was a secret agent. She had the word endure in her bones. No matter how tired or hungry she was, she could endure it. Of course she was also tired. But in her past life as a secret agent, who knew how many times she had experienced this kind of battle? Chapter 860. She had once fought with someone for a day and a night. In the end, the other party couldn't hold on any longer and was killed by her. Of course, she was also paralyzed. After that incident, she slept like a corpse in her little nest for a day and a night. Today, she had fought a total of 5 matches. The last match was especially exhausting. She was so tired that she wanted to lie down and sleep. But her excellent agent qualities allowed her to act as if nothing had happened even if she was tired or hungry when she didn't complete her mission. She could also maintain a good mental state, making others unable to see any signs of fatigue. Even though her injured leg had been healed by the ancestor's spirit medicine, the recovery time was still very short. Once she moved vigorously, there would still be some pain. Her movements today weren't ordinary vigorous, so the pain in her leg was also aggravating. Standing on the icicle made her injured leg almost tremble. Although the light at night was very dim, the people present were all outstanding in martial arts. Their night vision was very strong. Even in the dark, there wasn't much difference from daytime. Feng Jia Xian's night vision was also very strong. Her eyes were fixed on Ning Xuema. She could even see the sweat on Ning Xuema's forehead. Her heart stirred. She didn't wait for the Sun Moon sect disciple in charge of the competition to announce the start of the competition. She had already flown up and cupped her hands towards Ning Xuema. She planned to say a few polite words before seizing the opportunity to start the fight. Yelu Jing'an suddenly spoke up from below the stage. The competition will be temporarily suspended for 2 hours. It will start again after 2 hours. Feng Jiaxan was stunned and blurted out, "Why?" Yelu Jing'an didn't even look at her and said indifferently, "Do I need to explain to you, a junior?" Her words choked Feng Jiaxan and made her speechless. Everyone nodded their heads one after another. Just now the martial arts competition lasted for too long. The people on the stage had used up a lot of their energy. If they were to immediately start the second round, it would be too unfair to Ning Xuema. She would be able to rest for 2 hours and recover a little bit. Feng Jiaxian's wishful thinking fell through. She endured, but in the end she couldn't. Lord Protector, the competition has a rule. When the last 3 people fight, they have to fight continuously. Isn't it too unreasonable to stop midway? Yelu Jing'an's gaze finally landed on her. Is there a rule in the competition that doesn't allow for breaks? Feng Jiaxan was dumbfounded. Indeed, there was no such rule. Yelu Jing'an's voice grew colder. Or is it to say that Miss Feng is eager to take advantage of this and fight with her while she's tired? This way you can win and be glorious? Feng Jiaxan's pretty face turned slightly red. Jiaxan doesn't have such thoughts. The competition this time is to select the true top talents, not just the results. Therefore it's better to be a bit more fair to convince the masses. No matter who wins or loses, no one else has anything to say. Yelu Jing'an added. At this point, Feng Jiaxan had nothing to refute. She reluctantly jumped down from the ring. Ning Xuema also jumped down from the arena. Kiran immediately rushed over. "Master, are you tired? Are you hungry? Lean on me." Another disciple who was in charge of the food rushed over with a food box. "Miss Ning, this is the food prepared for you. Please eat some." Opening the food box, there were several side dishes and a bowl of porridge that was steaming hot. "Miss Ning, you fought for so long and used up too much energy. I have a nice heart fruit here that can relieve you a little." A Sun Moon sect disciple handed over a purple-red fruit. Chapter 861. Lady Ning, I have snow spring water here, it can calm your mind and help you quench your thirst. Another person handed over a gourd of water. Lady Ning. Countless disciples surrounded Ning Xuema, expressing their goodwill and handing over many things to her. Strong people were respected, especially this strong person was a young lady who used her own ability to fight. Her martial arts might not be the most outstanding in the eyes of those experienced people, but her spirit moved everyone. It made everyone who saw her go from indifferent to having a whole new level of respect. The Sun Moon sect did not lack strong people, but not every strong person was worthy of respect. Only Ning Xuema, this kind of person who never admitted defeat, dared to fight and did things in an open and above-board manner, was worthy of their respect. Moreover, Ning Xuema at this moment, because of the continuous competition and the loss of blood, her face was pale. She stood there charmingly looking a little weak. It made people want to take pity on her, to love her, to pamper her. Respect, love? These kinds of contradictory feelings were rolling in many people's hearts, making them want to give their best to her. Ning Xuema looked at the hands around her and the things in their hands, and her eyes suddenly felt a little hot. Since she came to this world, no matter where she went, she would always receive the world's malice. But here, although she met some malice, most people were still very good to her. She used her own charm to win everyone's respect. Feng Jiaxan was not far away looking, she was simply about to explode in anger. Those disciples who used to surround her were all gathered around Ning Xuema, making her seem a little lonely. At this moment, seeing those people giving things to Ning Xuema, the blood of jealousy rushed to her head, making her head explode. Feng Jiaxing could not help but sneer. Lady Ning should indeed replenish her strength, but during the competition she is not allowed to eat things that can suddenly increase her strength. The things that the senior brothers have given are naturally very good, but I don't know if there is such a thing in them. If there is such a thing, then... Hee. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough for everyone on the Star Brilliance platform to hear. Almost everyone was disgusted by her hee. However, there were also a small number of people who felt that what she said made sense. During the competition, it was indeed forbidden for the disciples to take any medicine or food that could rapidly increase their strength. If they were discovered, the best-case scenario would be that their results would be reset to 0, and the worst-case scenario would be that they would be expelled from the Sun Moon sect and never be recruited again. There were so many people sending Ning Xuema all kinds of food. It was hard to guarantee that there were no illegal items in them. Even if there were no illegal items, it would be easy for people to criticize them. At this time, Ning Xuema naturally did not want to leave a topic for others to gossip about. She was about to refuse. Yalu Jing and walked over. These things will be examined by someone. With a wave of his hand, he called over several alchemists and had them examine the food separately. Alchemists were a very special existence in the Sun Moon sect. Their level of alchemy was also one of the best in the entire continent. No medicine could escape their inspection. 2 alchemists quickly examined those things and cupped their hands towards Yalu Jing and, "Martial uncle, these things are very normal. There are no illegal items." Yalu Jing and glanced at Feng Jiaxin and had people divide the food into 2 portions, saying, "Send 1 portion to her." Chapter 862. Since there were only 2 people left to compete in the end, no one could find fault with the 2 people eating the same food. No matter how Feng Jiaxin schemed, she couldn't find any fault. And Yalu Jing'an's glance at her made her heart skip a beat. Could it be that the Great Guardian also saw that she didn't eat much? Otherwise, why would he share half of the food with her? Could it be that the Great Guardian still had a special impression of her? She steeled her heart and shamelessly went to pick a portion for herself. She smiled at Yalu Jing and, "Thank you, Great Guardian Yalu." Her smile was gentle and appropriate. Yalu Jing and didn't look at her and just said, "I'm just doing it for fairness. You don't have to be polite." Ning Xuema didn't say anything and didn't care about Feng Jiaxin sharing her food. She was racing against time to replenish her strength. Her table manners weren't the elegant and refined style of this era's noble girls. Instead, she was quick and free. Her table manners weren't bad, but her speed was extremely fast. In a short time she ate a fruit, a bowl of porridge and a dish. After eating, she immediately sat down to meditate. Feng Jiaxin's table manners were extremely delicate. She took small bites with her orchid fingers slightly raised, like a lady from a noble family. After more than an hour, she slowly finished her portion. Then she solemnly thanked the people who contributed the food. No one was left behind. Her every move was full of noble aura. After all, they had stayed here for so long. Those who hadn't practiced the Inidia technique began to eat their own dry food and fruits. Those who had already practiced Inidia gathered in groups of 3 to 5 to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the competition. After 2 hours, the final competition finally began. Feng Jiaxin and Ning Xuema jumped onto the ice cone arena. "Miss Ning, please enlighten me." Feng Jiaxin was very polite. Then she sent a message, "Little bitch, if I don't beat you up today, my surname isn't Feng. Miss Feng, please." Ning Xuema's etiquette was even more thorough than hers. She smiled again. "Who did you send a message to? I didn't hear it clearly. Why don't you say it again for everyone to hear?" Feng Jiaxin. How would she dare to admit it? She blinked her eyes blankly. "Miss Ning, did you hear wrongly? I didn't send you a voice transmission." "Is that so? It turned out that I had misheard. It seems like you're not the one who called me a little bitch. I wonder who's the one who doesn't dare to admit what he did behind my back. Isn't that right, Miss Feng?" Ning Xuema sighed. Feng Jiaxin. She was being scolded. She had scolded Ning Xuema using telepathy, but Ning Xuema had scolded her back openly, and she couldn't refute her. Her pretty face turned from white to red, then back to white. Ning Xuema tilted her head and looked at her. "Miss Feng, why aren't you saying anything? Do you think that the person who scolded me behind my back isn't despicable?" She looked down and smiled. "Everyone, do you think that a person who only dares to use telepathy to curse others but doesn't dare to admit it is filthy?" "Filthy." The meddlesome disciples of the Sun Moon sect below answered in unison. Feng Jessen's face was no longer green and red, it was almost green with fangs. She leaped up and a long sword quickly formed in her palm. She directly attacked Ning Xuema. Why bother about those gossip? Let's fight. She didn't want to argue with Ning Xuema anymore. She was no match for her and she would only embarrass herself. Chapter 863. She only wanted to defeat Ning Xuema completely and step on her under her feet, and then humiliate her. Of course, if she could pretend to accidentally kill her in the process of the competition, that would be even better. Once and for all, it would be the most appropriate method. The two of them fought on the ice cone ring like a revolving lantern. Ning Xuema had actually observed Feng Jessen's matches several times. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, then you can win 100 battles. So when Feng Jessen was fighting with others, she had also watched a few matches and had already figured out her martial arts. Of course, she also knew that Feng Jessen must have some tricks up her sleeves for this final moment, so she was also on guard. Since she had figured out Feng Jessen's martial arts, Ning Xuema naturally practiced the method to deal with her in her heart. Feng Jessen had the dual attributes of metal and earth. Earth gave birth to metal, and metal was the main attacking attribute. And her secondary attribute was also helpful to the metal attribute. It could be said that her dual attributes were the most beneficial and complemented each other. She was indeed a martial arts genius that was hard to come by in 100 years. And Ning Xuema had the dual attributes of wood and fire. Wood gave birth to fire. If she used the fire attribute as her main attacking attribute, then her wood attribute would be very helpful to the fire attribute. But now her main attacking attribute was wood, and the fire attribute was not beneficial to her at all. During the fight, she could not even use the fire attribute so as to prevent it from burning the wood attribute. Now the two of them, Ning Xuema used the wood attribute to attack, and Feng Jessen used the metal attribute to attack. Metal restrained wood, so if Ning Xuema used the attribute to attack, she would be at a disadvantage against Feng Jessen. What's more, the opponent's psychokinesis was higher than her by 2 levels. So Ning Xuema had already formulated a strategy to deal with her. She simply ignored all the attribute attacks, and took out 2 short swords to attack with her inner strength. After her psychokinesis had increased, her inner strength had also increased a lot. She poured her inner strength into the swords, and the 2 ordinary short swords had a few feet of sword light bursting out. Wherever it passed, it almost cut through the air. Every move he made had the power of a thunderbolt. Feng Jessen was simply #####. Her brain was in a mess. She had watched so many of Ning Xuema's matches, but she had never seen her use this kind of kung fu. She thought that Ning Xuema would use the vine whip, but she didn't expect that she would take out 2 ordinary short swords. However, these 2 short swords were very powerful. When they collided with the sword she condensed with the metal psyche power in the air, they made a harsh sound which made her wrist numb. The palm of his hand that was holding the sword hurt. In fact, using telekinesis to attack was a bit similar to a mage's attack in a video game. It was more beneficial than close combat. It focused on the cultivation of telekinesis rather than the improvement of the overall physical quality. In other words, they had high ATK and low HP. Once someone got close to him, he would be at a disadvantage. After all, no matter what kind of spell he used to attack, he would still need time to form hand seals and recite an incantation. This might be a short period of time, but as long as he didn't encounter a true melee attacker, the weakness of this attack wouldn't show. However, Ning Xuema was not only good at shooting in his previous life, but she was also very good at close combat. She rarely met a worthy opponent in close combat. In this life, because she was called a trash in telekinesis, she paid extra attention to the cultivation of her inner strength. Later on, although she also cultivated telekinesis, she didn't give up on her inner strength. The 2 types of power in her body were considered to be advancing together. When her inner strength reached a certain level, she could still walk on the waves without leaving a trace when she cultivated Qigong. When she fought, she could turn everything around her into her weapon. Chapter 864. Now, even if Ning Xuema threw out a leaf, it would have the power of a hidden dagger. At the beginning of the fight, she used the wood psychokinesis to protect her whole body, forming a protective layer. Although she could not make a bounded domain, it was not a problem for her to resist knives and swords. She held 2 short swords, and in a short time she approached Feng Jessen with a strange body movement and circled around her. When the short swords danced to the extreme, it was as if there were hundreds of short swords attacking Feng Jessen at the same time, forcing her to be in a mess. It was the first time for the audience to see Ning Xuema fight like this. They saw that her body movement was as fast as lightning, and she was always within 3 feet of Feng Jiesen. Feng Jiesen did not even have the chance to make gestures and chant spells to summon her flying sword. Feng Jiesen's flying sword technique was very powerful. She had defeated several opponents with this move in the fight with others just now. Could be said that it was her killer move. In fact, she really wanted to use it on Ning Xuema and let her have a taste of the power of this move. However, Ning Xuema did not give her a chance to use it. Besides, Ning Xuema was too close to her. Once she used this move, she was afraid that she would hurt herself. She tried her best to distance herself from Ning Xuema, but Ning Xuema was like her shadow circling around her. She could not get rid of her at all. She could only fight with her head on. The sound of the collision between the long sword and the short sword was like the intricate music of strings, and also like the rapid rain knocking on the window. Sparks flew everywhere and a series of sounds rang between heaven and earth. Although Feng Jiesen's psychokinesis was high, she had not been taught by a real master after all. She did not know many combat moves and she was not so proficient in using them. Once she was forced to fight with her opponent, she would not be able to win by pure physical strength. Feng Jiesen's whole arm was sore and numb. There were several times when she almost could not hold the long sword and was shaken away by Ning Xuema's short sword. She knew that it was not a good way to go on like this, but she could not think of any way to get rid of this situation. She was forced to retreat on the ice cone arena by Ning Xuema, and there were many times when she almost fell down from the ice cone arena. Everyone below the stage was a telekinesis expert, so they were used to using telekinesis to find a way to break through. They had seen people with the fire attribute suppressing people with the metal attribute, but they had never seen people with the wood attribute beating people with the metal attribute to the point where they couldn't even fight back. It was an eye-opener. What an eye-opener. Everyone below the stage felt that they had not watched the show in vain. It was so worth it. 2 hours passed. Another hour had passed. The sky in the distance was already turning white, and the dawn was about to break. Feng Jiesen was so tired that she was sweating profusely. Her sword had also been shaken to the point that there were countless cracks on it. Fortunately, her sword was condensed using psychokinesis. Once a crack appeared, she could quickly use psychokinesis to repair it. Otherwise, it would have already been broken by Ning Xuema. However, with the passage of time, the psychokinesis in her body began to dry up. When the long sword was knocked out again, it was extremely difficult for her to repair it. She had never fought with anyone for such a long time, and she had never met such an opponent who did not play by the rules. Ning Xuema's overbearing and imposing way of fighting made her afraid and apprehensive. At the same time, it also made her angry and resentful. It was clear that her psychokinesis was high. It was clear that the psychokinesis of her attribute could restrain the opponent's psychokinesis. However, she was suppressed and beaten without any strength to fight back. She was angry, she was angry, she was angry, she was angry. The tip of her tongue finally licked the medicinal pill that had been pressed under her tongue. Chapter 865. Feng Jiesen originally didn't want to use this pill. After all, it was given to her by an unknown person, and it happened to be an emergency, so she was more cautious. That was why he had been using a spell to keep the pill under his tongue and not touch it. But now, if she relied on her own ability to lose, it would be a matter of time. She couldn't lose, she wasn't willing to lose. Since she would be defeated sooner or later, she might as well take a gamble. She steeled her heart and used the tip of her tongue to pull out the pill and swallowed it. After a moment, she felt her whole body surging with heat. Her originally tired and sore body actually became lively again. All the discomfort gradually disappeared, and the psychokinesis in her body increased again. Ning Xuema originally estimated that she could completely force her out of the arena after dozens of moves, but she didn't expect that after dozens of moves she found that the opponent's psychokinesis, which was about to be exhausted, actually increased rapidly. Buzz. The long sword in Feng Jiesen's hand that was about to be broken by Ning Xuema suddenly doubled in size. Silver light circulated on it, like lightning flashing non-stop. Ning Xuema, accept your death. Feng Jiesen shouted loudly. Her long sword flickered and transformed into a mountain of swords, smashing down on Ning Xuema from head to toe. The wind was fierce, and the lightning on the sword mountain was circulating, almost blinding people's eyes. Yelu Jing En, who was watching the battle below, had a huge change in expression. Earth rank level 8. Feng Jiesen actually used the killer move that only Earth rank level 8 could use. When this move was used, the surrounding air was completely distorted by the strong psychokinesis wind. Even the white clouds in the sky were affected by this psychokinesis, desperately surging wind, clouds, and thunder. In the blink of an eye, a lightning struck down. Ka. A loud sound was heard, and half of the solid ice cone arena was blasted by the sudden lightning. The sword mountain spun in the air and moved quickly towards Ning Xuema. That threatening murderous aura almost cut everything in this world. Pa pa pa. Ning Xuema's wood protection psychokinesis barrier was like a fragile piece of glass as it was directly cut apart by the murderous aura of the sword mountain. Ning Xuema couldn't dodge the attack even after using several body movements. She gritted her teeth and decided to use the sword in her hand to block the attack. Before the sword in her hand could even touch the edge of the sword mountain, it had already shattered into a pile of scrap metal. If Ning Xuema had not retracted her hand quickly, her arm would have been swallowed up by the sword mountain. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, but in reality, it happened in an instant. This sudden change happened too fast, so fast that the audience below the stage could not react in time. Because the two people on the stage were in the middle of a fight, even if the others were anxious, they couldn't interfere. Only Kirin's voice was almost hoarse. "Master, be careful." At this moment, the difference in strength between the two of them was too great. Ning Xuema had not only failed to block the attack, but her blood and chi had also been shaken to the point that she almost spat out blood. She had no choice but to quickly retreat. She had forgotten that half of the ice cone arena had already been destroyed by the lightning, and there was a big crack. Her retreat just happened to step on that crack. She stepped on empty air and fell down. That crack was created out of thin air, so it wasn't very big. After Ning Xuema fell down, she was stuck in the bottom crack. She was about to jump out, but the sword mountain had already ruthlessly pressed down on her. Obviously, it wanted to thoroughly mince her into minced meat. Chapter 866. Although it was said that swords and sabers had no eyes, it was inevitable that someone would be seriously injured or even killed. But once someone was forced off the stage, it meant that they had won. After winning, only Feng Jessen could be so ruthless. "Stop!" Yelu Jing, and shouted loudly, his voice like thunder. At the same time, he also flew onto the stage and raised his hand to chop at the sword mountain. But this sword mountain was pressing down on the fissure, and most of it was within the fissure. Yelu Jing An's thunderous palm only caused the peak of the sword mountain to shake, but didn't change its downward momentum. Xuema. Yelu Jing An's voice changed. The ancestor had entrusted Ning Xuema's safety to him. If something happened to her at this time, how could he face his master? But the sword mountain was falling too fast and the crack was very narrow. The top of the crack was filled with the sword mountain. Even if he wanted to jump down to save her, he couldn't find a gap. His face was pale with fright. He was about to jump into the sword mountain recklessly, risking serious injury to shatter the sword mountain when a white shadow suddenly flashed over. At the same time, the white shadow raised his palms, and a faint white light rushed into the sword mountain. The sword mountain that was spinning down suddenly seemed to be attracted by something, and in the blink of an eye, it melted like snow and disappeared without a trace. All of this happened too fast in just a moment. Yelu Jing and was stunned, looking at the white-clothed ancestor who flashed over. You. Was this person fake or real? The fake ancestor hated Ning Xuema, so he shouldn't be able to save her in time. But it was hard to say. After all, the fake ancestor didn't dare to let Ning Xuema die, or else he wouldn't be able to explain himself. The ancestor's thunderous anger wasn't something anyone could withstand. Yelu Jing and looked at the white-clothed ancestor in a daze, and didn't react for a moment. Most of the people below the stage didn't know that there was a fake ancestor, so when they saw him appear they all bowed down. Ancestor. The ancestor floated on the edge of the broken ring. His white robe was particularly dazzling in the dark night. His expression couldn't be seen clearly under the white jade mask. He didn't even look at the crowd below the ring. Instead, he flashed and jumped directly into the crack. Yelu Jing'an's heart also skipped a beat. Just now, the huge sword mountain had almost completely filled the crack. Although the ancestor had made the sword mountain disappear, was Ning Xuema, who was stuck in the crack, injured? Is she alright? If she was fine, Di Zun wouldn't have jumped down, right? Yelu Jing and hastily took 2 steps forward and rushed to the edge of the crack. When she looked down, her expression changed. It was a mess inside the crack. Only the ancestor's silhouette could be seen, but there was no trace of Ning Xuema. Heavens! Could it be that Miss Ning had already been ground into minced meat? Yelu Jing'an's vision darkened and he nearly fell down. He was about to jump down to take a look when he saw the white-clothed ancestor's silhouette flash. He directly jumped out of the Star Brilliant stage and flew down the mountain again. The Sun Moon sect disciples who were kneeling on the ground looked at each other. Previously, when they were kneeling, the ancestor would lightly say don't. But this time he didn't even care about them. Also, is Miss Ning Xuema all right? Countless people subconsciously looked towards the crack, but only saw that after the collapse of the high platform and the rolling of the Sword Mountain, there was a large round hole. Only the bottom, about 2 feet high, wasn't affected. There were jagged teeth on it and there wasn't even a blood stain. Chapter 867. Was Miss Ning turned into ashes or did she manage to escape in time? She was stuck like that and was attacked by such a powerful Sword Mountain. I'm afraid she couldn't escape, right? Could it be that she really, almost everyone clenched their fists tightly? Jianwang's body swayed for a moment before he suddenly leaped out from the crowd and jumped into the gap as well. Where was Ning Xuema? She was bitterly waiting at the waist of the mountain. Just now when the Sword Mountain was pressing down, she was unable to escape. At the most critical moment, she suddenly remembered the earth escape technique that the ancestor had taught her. She was not proficient in using that technique and had not even used it properly yet. But at this critical moment she could only clench her teeth and give it a try. Her original intention was to escape to the outside of the stage, but she did not expect that under the pressure, she would be able to escape a few hundred meters and out of the Star Brilliance stage. The Star Brilliance stage was built on top of an independent mountain peak and was surrounded by steep cliffs and cliffs. Ning Xuemo used the earth escape technique, and as expected, she managed to escape from the Sword Mountain's pressure. In a blink of an eye, she had already escaped from the precipitous cliff and directly flew downwards. Fuck. What this sister hates the most in this life is falling down from cliffs. Fortunately, the cliff was not completely bare. Ning Xuema found a small tree on the cliff when she was falling. The tree was not big and was only as thick as an arm. Ning Xuema had no choice but to immediately condense a vine whip and wrapped it around the small tree. The huge downward force caused the small tree to shake violently. The branches made cracking sounds as half of the tree's roots were pulled out by the force of the pull. Ning Xuema held onto the vine whip, dangling there leisurely. The small tree was only connected by a few small branches and was in imminent danger. Ning Xuema took a deep breath and tried her best to reduce her weight. Looking up, there were clouds and mist lingering around. Looking down, it was so dark that she could not see the bottom. Her position was halfway up the mountain and it was an awkward position. She cursed in her heart and took a deep breath. Her body that was suspended in the air slowly moved closer to the cliff. Because the small tree was about to break, if he used a little more strength, it would fall. Now it was in a delicate state of balance. She must be very, very careful. She originally wanted to change to another small tree for support, but there was only one nearby. So, in order to stabilize herself, she had to cling to a rock sticking out of the cliff to be safe. She had already spotted a sharp stone protruding half a foot out of the cliff about 10 feet away from her body. She only needed to grab hold of that sharp stone protruding half a foot out of the cliff. It would not be too late for her to use her qinggong to fly up. Ning Xuema's body inched closer and closer to the cliff. Just as she was about to touch the cliff, a shadow suddenly appeared above her. She looked up instinctively and her expression changed. It was a person flying down. His speed was like a falling meteor. His fluttering white clothes were exceptionally dazzling, and his white jade mask was shining with a faint luster. Venerable sovereign. It was actually a venerable sovereign. In the blink of an eye, he landed beside her. With a wave of his sleeve, he grabbed the vine whip in her hand. Bastard. This small tree could no longer bear any more weight. She was afraid that if an egg was placed on it, this small tree would break. This bastard did it on purpose. He wanted to kill her completely. Ning Xuema was so scared that her face turned pale. Chapter 868. However, Ning Xuema had obviously underestimated the other party's strength. The man had indeed grasped her vine whip, and his body was suspended there like a weightless leaf. He was on par with Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema stared at him vigilantly. Was he trying to use this opportunity to negotiate with her? If she didn't agree, he would only need to pull the vine whip slightly and she would fall again. If she fell to her death, others would only think that she had accidentally fallen, and no one would suspect the fake Dizun. Her life and death was really in his hands. Ning Xuema had already analyzed the pros and cons in her mind. She knew that this was not the time to be stubborn. She didn't wait for him to speak and immediately said, I lost. So don't worry, I won't take the Dizun as my master anymore. The white-clothed Dizun was about to reach out to her, but when he heard her words, his hand paused in the air. He looked down at Ning Xuema, his eyes unfathomable. There was a way. Ning Xuema continued, I know that you have tried to make things difficult for me several times because you don't want me to take the Dizun as my master. Now that I have achieved your wish, why do you still want to kill me? The white-clothed Dizun paused. Did I make things difficult for you? His voice was slightly lower, as if he was closer to the real Dizun. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. She almost thought that the person in front of her was the real Shinjuli. However, it shouldn't be, right? How could there be such a coincidence? She looked up at him. Amidst the mountain wind, the small tree swayed again. 2 more tree roots were broken. Ning Xuema was shocked and immediately said, Okay, you didn't make things difficult for me. I didn't want to take the Dizun as my master. You should be relieved now, right? Damn it, her life was the most important thing now. Everything else was fleeting clouds. The Dizun's eyes deepened. If you don't want to take me as your master, who do you want to take as your master? She had never wanted to take this fake as her master, okay? This person was addicted to pretending to be an emperor and thought that he was a true emperor. At this time, Ning Xuema naturally didn't want to bicker with him over this. She only wanted to dispel his killing intent. She immediately said, Actually, Yelu Jing, and isn't bad either. His martial arts are high, his personality refined, and he has patience. I'll take him as my disciple. She had already lost anyways and was considered second place. She could freely choose her master, so she chose Yelu Jing, and that person would be a good master. His disciples were also very famous on this continent. Dizun, Yelu Jing, and is he as good as this lord? His tone was somewhat cold. This time, Ning Xuema answered without hesitation, Of course. Of course Ning Xuema was better than this fake venerable emperor. Yelu Jing, and had been helping her both in the open and in the dark, but this fake overlord was always making things difficult for her. He wished he could torture her to death. The ancestor was wearing a cold jade mask, so Ning Xuema couldn't see his expression. She could only see that his eyes were as deep as the cold stars. Crack. 2 more roots of the sapling broke. Ning Xuema panicked. She glared at the person above and didn't bother to beat around the bush. Hey, what do you want? Just say it. Don't tell me you want to kick me out of the Sun Moon sect? If I really kick you out, will you agree? The ancestor's voice deepened. If she didn't agree, she was afraid that she would immediately die. Ning Xuema looked at the bottomless abyss below her feet and gritted her teeth. Did you give me any other choice? The ancestor was silent for a moment. When did I make things difficult for you? Tell me about it. Chapter 869. Ning Xuema threw caution to the wind and said, You really want me to say it? Of course. Everything. The ancestor didn't hold back either. All right. Ning Xuema had a stomach full of anger. She immediately said, You made me go through the levels alone in the maze illusion realm and almost died under the claws of the Yazi beast. You deliberately made things difficult for me. I risked my body to get out of the maze illusion realm with great difficulty, but you made me pass 6 levels in 12 hours. You even made things difficult for me at every level. In order to eliminate me, you didn't hesitate to hide in the dark to help Feng Jiasen. In the 6th level you plotted against me and made me unconscious. If I didn't wake up in time, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to pass the 6th level. Is this considered making things difficult for me? Just now, Feng Jiasen's strength suddenly increased by nearly 2 times. Do you dare to say that you didn't play tricks behind the scenes? The ancestor's eyes darkened. You were injured by the Yazi beast? He suddenly slid down. The green vine shook slightly, scaring Ning Xuema so much that she screamed, Don't move! The ancestor's body suddenly stopped moving. He held the green vine with one hand and was half a body's length taller than her. He didn't stay close to Ning Xuema, and there was an arm's length between them. Ning Xuema took a deep breath. I know. I, Ning Xuema, am just a small shrimp in your eyes. You can easily kill me. Don't worry. I won't tell anyone that you are a substitute. I will also keep the matter of you making things difficult for me in my stomach and won't mention it to anyone. She was still too weak now. As the saying went, an arm couldn't twist a leg. She wouldn't risk her life to expose his identity. That wouldn't benefit anyone. She would be silenced. If the fact that the ancestor had a substitute was spread out, it would definitely be a reign of terror. It would also bring countless troubles to Shinjioli. Ning Xuema. The ancestor slid down another inch and grabbed her hand. Ka. That small tree couldn't withstand his repeated attempts to break the delicate balance. Finally he succeeded in snapping it. Ning Xuema screamed as she fell down. This bastard. She had already lowered herself so much. I've already promised him so much, but he still won't let me go. She even wanted to fall to her death. Just as she was about to desperately adjust her inner breath to stabilize her falling momentum, she heard the sound of wind beside her ear. Her waist was tightened and she was already in someone's arms. Her body suddenly froze. She smelled that familiar faint cold fragrance. Her heart raced as she raised her head abruptly. "You," Dizun hovered in the air with her in his arms looking down at her. "You little fool. Since you know that I have a substitute, can't you tell the difference between the real and the fake?" He was real. He was a real venerable sovereign. Shinjuli? She still didn't quite believe it. "It's me." Shinjuli tightened his arms around her waist. "Don't be afraid, I'm back." Ning Shuima suddenly felt a warm current rush into her eyes. It was as if a sour soap bubble had burst in her heart. She didn't know why, but she actually felt wronged. She wanted to open her mouth to speak, but her throat seemed to be choked by something and she couldn't speak for a while. The moment Shinjuli held her in his arms, he had secretly checked her body. She had some blood loss and was a little tired. Fortunately, her body had a good foundation, so there weren't any major problems or internal injuries. More importantly, she had already reached the second level of the Earth realm. It seemed that this little girl was working hard. She didn't waste the elixirs he gave her in the illusory castle. Chapter 870. Ning Shuima didn't know that the food she had eaten for the past few days contained rare medicinal herbs that could rapidly increase a person's psychokinesis without causing any harm to the human body. However, if she was a good-for-nothing and didn't have a high level of comprehension, those medicinal herbs were still useless. Only when the two were combined could they bring out the best in each other. "You don't have to say anything else. Shuima, do you still want to acknowledge me as your master?" The ancestor stared at her. "Of course I do." Ning Shuima replied without hesitation and paused. "But, according to the rules, you should accept the strongest as your disciple and I lost just now." Thinking of this, Ning Shuima wanted to clench her fist again. She obviously shouldn't have lost. "No, you didn't lose." Shinjuli spat out 4 simple words and added, "Let's go up." He carried her and leaped up, his body like a cloud floating upwards. Ning Shuima laid in his embrace and smelled the unique fragrance on his body. Suddenly she felt incomparably at ease. It was only at this moment that she felt her whole body was so tired and sore that she felt like she was going to be crippled. She didn't have any strength left. He carried Ning Shuima and ascended at a very fast speed, but she didn't feel a trace of the cold wind in his embrace. It was very obvious that he used a technique to block the cold wind. When they were about to fly up the Star Brilliant stage, Ning Shuima heard Feng Jessen's excited voice that almost changed pitch. "I won. I won." Ning Shuima couldn't help but look at Shinjuli. Shinjuli raised his hand and rubbed her hair. "Be good. Then do you still want to accept the strongest as your disciple?" Ning Shuima couldn't help but ask. "Of course." Shinjuli answered naturally. As they spoke, the two had already flown up the Star Brilliant stage. The Star Brilliant stage was somewhat chaotic. Jiyun Huang, Helian Xiao, and the ancestors' 5 disciples. These people were searching everywhere for Ning Shuima's whereabouts. Feng Jessen had already sunk into a state of madness like Fan Jin. She stood on the collapsed stage and laughed like a madman. "I won, I won. I'm going to become the ancestors' disciple. I will be the ancestors' only female disciple." "No, you lost." A cold voice suddenly sounded, as cold as ice, instantly suppressing Feng Jessen's slightly shrill laughter. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound and saw the ancestor slowly ascending from the bottom of the cliff with a person in his arms. "We pay our respects to the ancestor." Everyone knelt down. Jiyun Huang was in the middle of picking up the debris. When he heard this sound, he raised his head. Not only did he see the ancestor, he also saw Ning Shuima in his arms. He was overjoyed. She jumped out of the crack, even forgetting to kowtow to her grandmaster. She was so happy that she forgot her manners. "Shuima, this is great." She was fine. Great, she's still alive. When Ning Shuima heard his shout, she couldn't help but look at Jiyun Huang and was shocked. Jiyun Huang stood there. His originally white jade-like hands were scratched in many places because of the rubble and wood chips. Blood was dripping from his hands. His silky smooth hair was somewhat messy and his robes were torn in many places. It was poles apart from his usual image. Heavens, I haven't seen him for a while. How did he become like this? Ning Shuima had just glanced at Jiyun Huang when her head was gently turned by someone, causing her beautiful face to stick to his chest. She could no longer see the scene below. Jiyun Huang's shout was quite loud and everyone present could hear it. However, when he finished speaking, he felt a pair of icy eyes looking at him. Chapter 871. This gaze seemed to have a physical form, causing Ji Yunhuang to instantly shiver. He finally remembered the proper etiquette and hurriedly knelt down. Disciple has been rude, greetings to the ancestor. Feng Jessen, who had been laughing like a madman on the stage, also came back to her senses and knelt down on the stage. She finally shouted out the greeting she wanted to call. Master Jessen greets you. However, before she knelt down, a gust of wind blew towards her, causing her to stagger backwards and almost fall off the stage. A cold voice said faintly, "This ancestor will not accept you." The voice was cold, but in Feng Jessen's ears, it was not inferior to Jiao Lei. She suddenly raised her head, even forgetting the rule of not looking up at the ancestor. Why? This disciple won until the end. The ancestor did not have the intention to talk to her directly. He only ordered Yelu Jing and send someone to check what medicine she used. Yes. A moment ago, Yelu Jing and was busy looking for Ning Xuema and didn't have time to pay attention to Feng Jessen. Now that she heard the ancestor's order, she immediately complied and signaled to the 3 pharmacist disciples from the pill house. The 3 pharmacists walked towards Feng Jessen. Feng Jessen's expression changed greatly. She suddenly retreated. This disciple relied on her own ability to win and did not use any medicine. You can't check me. I'm a girl, I can't let a man check me. She was now an Earth Stage Level 8 psychokinesis. The 3 pharmacist disciples' levels were not as high as Feng Jessen, so they could not get close to her. Yelu Jing and faintly frowned. He raised his hand and without seeing how he did it, a transparent light wave shot towards Feng Jessen. Feng Jessen only felt her legs tighten as if they were bound by something and could not move. She was shocked. She did not expect that her high psychokinesis would not be able to block one move from Yelu Jing and, seeing the 3 pharmacists walking over, she finally could not help but cry out, "Forget it, if you don't want me to be first, then I won't be first. I'm willing to be second, this way you should be satisfied, right?" Yelu Jing'an's face was heavy as water, ignoring her clamor. He didn't speak, but those 3 pharmacists naturally wouldn't stop. They stepped forward and grabbed her arm. Feng Jiaxian's face was already as pale as a ghost and she suddenly burst into tears. "I know you don't like a commoner like me, no matter how hard I try it won't work. You know that I'm all alone and don't have any backing, so you bully me as much as you want." The crowd didn't expect that she, who usually acted like a noble, would shout like a little shrew. They were stunned for a moment. Clearly she was the one who was reaping what she sowed. Yet, from time to time she would accuse others of bullying her. It was as if her identity as a commoner had become her shield. Ning Xuema wanted to laugh when she heard Feng Jessen's clamor. She had seen many shrews, but this was the first time she had seen someone as strange as Feng Jessen. "You can't touch me. I'm a pure and innocent girl. If I'm touched by you stinky men, how can I get married in the future?" Feng Jessen's screams almost pierced through the clouds. She dared to be so arrogant in front of a venerable sovereign. Everyone was sweating profusely. What was the saying of the ignorant being fearless? This was it. It was probably the first time Shinjuli had encountered such a strange person. He faintly shot a glance at Yelu Jing and immediately made a move. With a wave of his sleeve, Feng Jessen finally shut up. Only her pair of eyes kept rolling around, her face alternating between green and white. Chapter 872. The pharmacist didn't use any special method to check Feng Jessen's body. One of them put a finger between her eyebrows, and the other 2 checked her pulse. After a moment, the 3 of them let go at the same time and reported to Dizun. "Dizun, this girl took Tian Shui 1 hour ago." As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. The people present were all experienced and knowledgeable people. They naturally knew Tian Shui 1, the continent's most taboo forbidden drug. Its effect was similar to modern stimulants. Of course, stimulants couldn't compare to its effect. In a short time, it could almost double the psychokinesis in the body. But this effect could only last for 2 hours. After 2 hours, the psychokinesis in the body would be greatly depleted. It couldn't be recovered even after several months. It would also cause great damage to the body. It was listed as the continent's first forbidden drug. This pill hadn't appeared in this continent for hundreds of years. No one expected Feng Jessen to use it. No wonder she was able to unleash such ferocious attacks all of a sudden. It was because she had eaten this. It seemed she was really unscrupulous in order to win. Everyone was talking about it and looked at Feng Jessen with some disdain. Yelu Jing and stretched out her finger to open Feng Jessen's sealed acupoint. Her voice was cold. "What else do you have to say now?" Feng Jessen was still young after all. She didn't know much about pills and didn't know what Tian Shuiwan was. Hearing Yilu Jing'an's question, she still wanted to argue, "I'm innocent." Jessen didn't know what Tian Shuiwan was and didn't expect to take this. Someone must have seen Jessen's high martial arts and was jealous, so they deliberately framed Jessen. Before Jessen and Miss Ning fought, Jessen ate her food. There must be something strange in the food. Poor Jessen didn't know and mistakenly fell into a trap. These words were obviously directed at Ning Xuema. She vaguely said that in order to frame her, Ning Xuema deliberately drugged her. She also threw caution to the wind. She looked at Ning Xuema, who was still lying on Di Zun's body. Her eyes flashed with resentment. "Miss Ning, I know I don't have a high status like you, and I don't have a strong background like you. Why do you want to frame a lonely girl like me? I'll give you the first place. Don't go too far." Ning Xuema had truly opened her eyes. This girl Zhu Beiji's ability to play the blame game was truly exquisite. She didn't want to argue with this kind of person. Talking to this kind of person would only make her mouth dirty, so she just smiled and didn't say anything. Yilu Jing, and simply wanted to facepalm. He had come into contact with all kinds of people, but he had never come into contact with a shrew. He was too lazy to talk nonsense with this woman. The three pharmacists couldn't stand it. One of them sneered, "What nonsense are you talking about? You ate your meal 2.5 hours ago, and you took your medicine 1 hour ago. It was obviously eaten during the fight. Who can give you pills during a fight?" His words made Feng Jessen choke. She took a step back and couldn't refute. This, she steeled her heart and decided not to admit it. I remember now. During the fight, I unintentionally took a deep breath, but I didn't know where a pill flew into my mouth. I was caught off guard and swallowed it. How could I know what Tian Shuiwan was? It must be someone who wants to frame a girl like me who has no background and doesn't want me to get the first place. Chapter 873. This kind of reason was simply strange. How could she think of it? Ning Xuema simply wanted to praise her. However, this kind of reason was too far-fetched. It was obvious that she was treating the Sun Moon Sex people as fools. The onlookers felt angry and amused at the same time. They looked at Feng Jessen with disdain. Yilu Jing, and suddenly smiled and said indifferently, "Feng Jessen, your psychokinesis is indeed a genius, but your character is strange. Do you think the Sun Moon sect is a place where you can spout nonsense?" Guards. 2 disciples of the Sun Moon sect's punishment hall came forward and bowed, waiting for orders. Yilu Jing, and said, "Immediately investigate the origin of this Miss Feng's pills and give an explanation to the innocent people who were splashed with dirty water." Yes. The disciples of the punishment hall stepped forward and subdued Feng Jessen without saying anything. One of them slapped her in the middle of her back. Another person placed a finger on her temple. Feng Jessen screamed. Her eyes rolled up, and her body swayed for a moment before returning to normal. She was bewildered. She looked at one and then looked at the other. What do you want to do?" The 2 disciples of the punishment hall seemed to be afraid of dirtying their hands. After casting their spells, they immediately let go of her and each took a step back. One of them said, "Feng Jessen, where did your pills come from?" Feng Jessen originally wanted to quibble, but her mouth suddenly didn't seem to listen to her. She immediately replied, "Last night, a black-clothed man gave them to me." "What kind of black-clothed man?" "His back was facing me so I couldn't see his appearance. However, his figure was tall and straight. He should be a handsome man." Feng Jessen replied. Feng Jessen was about to go crazy. These were the secrets in her heart. She shouldn't have said them out loud, but she couldn't control her mouth. She answered every question and all of it was the truth. "You didn't know who the other party was, yet you dared to take his pills? Aren't you afraid that he would harm you?" "I'm afraid, but I want to win. I must win. I want to be the Empress of Fengyi country. I want Protector Yilu to notice me. I want to chase him into my hands and make him work for me." The people below were in an uproar. No one expected this little girl to have such grand ambitions. The Empress adopted her and treated her better than her own. Because of this, she lost her beloved daughter. Instead of repaying him, she wanted to usurp his position. There were also some who looked towards Yilu Jingyan. It was hard to imagine what it would be like for this Sun Moon sect's general manager to risk his life for this little girl. Feng Jessen really dared to dream. Yilu Jingyan. His usually gentle and handsome face had no expression at all. Being remembered by such a pervert made him feel a little disgusted. The two punishment hall disciples also wanted to laugh, but they knew that if they did, they would definitely be beaten up by head steward Yi Lui. Therefore, they remained expressionless and continued to ask, "When did you take this medicine?" "An hour ago. I saw that I was no match for that little bitch, so I could only take a gamble." Now that the truth was out, Yelu Jing paused and asked, "How did Feng Yunj die?" Feng Yunj was the official princess of the Fengyi kingdom, the one who had jumped into the river. "I ambushed her from behind, then pushed her into the river." This was Feng Jessen's biggest secret. Even if her teeth were broken, she wasn't prepared to say it. She didn't expect that she would involuntarily say it here. After saying this secret, her face was deathly pale. Chapter 874. Everything else was fine. At most, she would be expelled from the Sun Moon sect for taking illegal drugs. With Feng Jessen's talent, she could still join other large sects and make a name for herself. But once this secret was revealed, how could the Empress of Fengyi country let her off? Yelu Jing bowed to the ancestor and said, "Master, everything has been clarified. How should we deal with this girl?" The ancestor was too lazy to pay attention to this kind of person. If it wasn't for the fact that she wanted to scheme against Ning Xuema, he wouldn't even be bothered to listen to this nonsense. He didn't bother to look at Feng Jessen again and said indifferently, "This girl's character is inferior. Cripple all of her psychokinesis and send her back to Fengyi country." "Yes." Yelu Jing agreed. With a wave of his sleeve, a faint silver light surrounded Feng Jessen. A moment later, Feng Jessen screamed and fell to the ground. What she relied on was her innate psychokinesis. Now that it had been crippled, what hope did she have? She opened her mouth to plead for mercy, but Yelu Jing didn't want to listen to her clamor anymore. He simply sealed her mute acupoint and instructed the disciple in charge of recruitment. "Send someone to send her back to Fengyi country and hand her over to the Empress. While you're at it, report everything she confessed today to the Empress and let the Empress punish her." The disciple in charge of recruitment was a bit apprehensive because he'd brought in such a weirdo. Hearing such an order, he hurriedly agreed and escorted Feng Jessen away without any explanation. What awaited her was the Empress' revenge and severe punishment. The Sun Moon sect didn't want to dirty their hands for such a woman. After everything was dealt with, Yelu Jing knelt to the ancestor and asked for forgiveness. "Master, this disciple was negligent and let such a person in. Please punish me, Master." The ancestor's gaze swept over him indifferently. "Punish yourself with 20 lashes and kneel in Tianfeng Valley for 3 days. "Yes." Yelu Jing kowtowed and accepted his punishment. After dealing with that black sheep, Ning Xuema won first place in both name and in reality. Everyone had witnessed her martial arts and was naturally very convinced. Di Zun's gaze fell on Ning Xuema, who was standing to the side and watching the bustling scene. There was a hint of a smile in his eyes as he asked, "Isn't it time for you to become an apprentice?" In fact, Ning Xuema had just struggled out of his arms not long ago. At this moment, looking at the ancestor sitting on the high seat, her heart suddenly felt uncertain. This great god's attitude towards her was really ambiguous. His every move was full of possessiveness, yet he still wanted her to be his disciple. She looked around again. Wasn't it supposed to be a grand ceremony to acknowledge a master? Shouldn't they be in some solemn hall, burning a few sticks of incense for their ancestors, praying and worshipping? Now that he had pulled out a chair from God knows where and sat there, she could become his disciple just because of that? Ning Xuema felt that this apprenticeship ceremony was a bit like playing house. It wasn't very grand. "What? You're not willing?" Di Zun rested his chin on his hand and looked at her lazily. Under the mask, his pair of black eyes gleamed. He looked extremely elegant and lazy. "I'm willing," Ning Xuema replied. Forget it. This was something she had risked her life to obtain. She didn't need to think too much about it. She secretly took a breath and knelt down in front of him. Disciple Ning Xuema greets Master. She respectfully kowtowed 3 times. After these 3 kowtows, she would no longer be his concubine, but his disciple. This was originally what Ning Xuema had been striving for, but now that she had achieved this goal, she faintly felt a sense of loss in the depths of her heart. Chapter 875. The ancestor waited for her to finish kowtowing before raising his sleeve. A snow-white jade tablet flew out and landed in her palm. Ning Xuema, from today onwards you are my 19th disciple. Among my disciples, you are the second to pass 6 stages in 12 hours. You are also the one with the lowest aptitude. Ning Xuema was speechless. Was he praising or belittling her? Forget it, she'll just take it as a compliment. Ning Xuema carelessly replied, "Yes, master." She looked down at the jade tablet in her hand. It was carved from fine white jade. On the front, there was a lifelike lotus flower. On the back, there was a complicated pattern that faintly flowed with spiritual power. From today onwards, you must work hard in your cultivation. I will give you 2 years to reach the 8th level of the earth rank. If you fail, I will expel you from the sect. The ancestor stated his expectations. The crowd was speechless. The ancestor's requirements were frighteningly high. According to their aptitudes, if they were earth rank 2, it would take them 2 to 3 years to reach earth rank 3. If they succeeded, they would be called geniuses. It would get harder and harder to level up. Even if they were geniuses, it would take them 20 to 30 years to reach earth rank 8. Now he wanted Ning Xuema to level up 6 times in 2 years. This was simply impossible. Yilu Jing and couldn't help but look at the ancestor. She almost suspected that this ancestor was also a substitute. Ning Xuema naturally knew the difficulty of leveling up. Her lips twitched and she couldn't help but look at the ancestor. She was a bit suspicious that the ancestor had changed again. In order for you to reach this requirement as soon as possible, I will personally train you day and night. The ancestor spoke slowly. Ning Xuema was speechless. Why did she feel that these 2 sentences were ambiguous? All the disciples were speechless. Their ancestor was high and mighty. Naturally, they didn't dare to think the wrong way. They all looked enviously at Ning Xuema. This girl was so lucky to be able to make the ancestor train her day and night. The 5 disciples of the ancestor were even more envious. When they first became Di Zun's disciples, Di Zun would usually throw a pile of books at them for the first year and ask them to memorize them. If they didn't understand something, they weren't allowed to ask. They had to memorize it first. He only began to teach them martial arts the 2nd year, and that was only 3 or 4 times a year. The rest of the time they had to rely on themselves to comprehend it. If the Supreme God was happy, perhaps he could give them 5 or 6 times a year, then they would have profited. Even when it was Yi Qingwan, the ancestor had treated her no differently than any other male disciple. Of course, the ancestor had never made such a perverted request to any other disciple. Only Yilu Jing understood, but didn't dare to say it out loud. The ancestor once again swept his gaze across the audience. His gaze paused on the pale-faced Ji Yunhuang for a moment before he spoke in an indifferent tone. You can all pay your respects to her. Aside from the 5 disciples of the ancestor, everyone present was either the ancestor's grand disciple or his grand disciple's disciple. There were even some grand disciples of his grand disciples. Now that Ning Xuema had become the ancestor's disciple, these people naturally had to call her martial aunt or martial granduncle. Everyone didn't hesitate and bowed down to Ning Xuema, martial granduncle. Martial granduncle. Ji Yunhuang also slowly bowed down. He was the ancestor's grand disciple, so naturally he had to call Ning Xuema martial aunt. The ancestor continued, announced to all countries, sects and families that from today onwards, Ning Xuema is my direct disciple. Chapter 876. Yes. Yilu Jing agreed. With this announcement, Ning Xuema would be at the top of the world from now on. No one would dare to bully her or covet her qilin. No matter where she went, she would receive the grandest treatment. Naturally, Ning Xuema also knew what the ancestor's order represented. For a moment she didn't know what to feel. In the future she would be able to intimidate others. This was the first time she borrowed a man's glory, however she would become stronger. In the future she would rely on her own ability to stand at the top of the world. And not borrow other people's prestige. She inwardly sucked in a breath. Just as she was about to say something, a breeze blew by her side. The ancestor, who was sitting on the high platform a moment ago, had already arrived in front of Ning Xuema. He took her hand. Let's go back to Sky Sound Peak. With a slight sway of his body, he disappeared from the high platform. Everyone. They looked at each other. The ancestor was actually holding a girl's hand. Heavens, the ancestor actually took the initiative to hold a girl's hand. Although the ancestor had just carried Ning Xuema up, everyone had automatically thought that the ancestor had a high style and didn't care about etiquette when saving someone. Although the ancestor had carried Ning Xuema for a while, everyone still felt that the ancestor cherished her too much and hugged and coaxed her for a while. But now the ancestor had taken the initiative to hold the girl's hand. And in such an open and above-board manner. Everyone felt that this was a little subtle. Of course no one dared to say it out loud. Not only did they not dare to gossip about the ancestor, it was also extremely blasphemous to even think about it. Only Ji Yunhuang, who was leaning on a big rock, had an unusually pale face. He was extremely intelligent and was born in the imperial palace. Since he was young he grew up in a group of women. The brothers around him often went to brothels. Even if he didn't really like anyone he still understood the feelings between men and women. The relationship between the ancestor and Ning Xuema was definitely not as simple as a master and disciple. Originally he had heard that Ning Xuema had entered the Sun Moon sect, and that she and Han Shangyue had yet to consummate their marriage. His heart still held a glimmer of hope, hoping that he could win the heart of this beauty. He looked gentle and refined, but he was actually an extremely domineering man. He didn't like people easily, but once he didn't want to let go. This time he had already made up his mind to pursue Ning Xuema forcefully. He didn't want to care about those messy things anymore. He just wanted to marry her. Even with Tian Xueqing by his side, he did not change his mind. He couldn't refuse Tian Xueqing's marriage, but he could marry two women at the same time. When he ascended the throne in the future, one of them would be the empress, while the other would be the imperial concubine. It wouldn't affect anything. Of course, in his heart, Ning Xuema wanted to be his empress. Even if he made Ning Xuema the crown princess, he would still find a way to make Ning Xuema the empress after he ascended the throne, making her the #1 person in the harem. His idea was actually a very common idea in this era, and no one would criticize it. After all, this was a patriarchal society. It was normal for men to have 3 wives and 4 concubines in this era. If a man only had 1 wife, he would become a strange existence. Of course, this was only in the vast Sky Empire. The majority of men were like this. However, in the Sun Moon sect, the disciples here were cultivating every day. Before they reached a certain level of cultivation, no one would even consider the matter of getting married. Chapter 877. But now Ning Xuema had become the ancestor's direct disciple and Ji Yunhuang's martial uncle, so he did not dare to reveal this thought. Especially when he saw the subtle interaction between the ancestor and Ning Xuema, he felt that something was not right. Could it be that the ancestor also had feelings for Ning Xuema? He clenched his fists in his sleeves. Originally, he thought that even if Ning Xuema was angry with him, she still had a good impression of him. As long as he really held her hand, he would be able to keep her by his side. However, he did not expect that when he really wanted to look for her, she was already gone. Now, she was getting further and further away from him, so far away that he could no longer stand side by side with her. He stood there in a daze, his heart filled with unprecedented despair. "Your Highness, your hand is injured. Let this concubine help you deal with it." Tian Xueqing had silently approached him and finally could not help but speak up. "Scram!" Ji Yunhuang coldly shouted and flung Tian Xueqing's hand away. Tian Xueqing took a step back. She lowered her eyes slightly and her face paled. The crown prince, who had always been as cold as an immortal, actually cursed. This showed how bad his mood was. Her lips curled into a bitter smile and she did not speak anymore. At this time, no matter what she said or did, it would be wrong. She would not be able to gain his favor. It turned out that gaining a man's favor was so difficult. It turned out that even if she gave up everything, she was still dispensable in his eyes. Ji Yunhuang was annoyed. He left Tian Xueqing on the spot and strode away. She was surrounded by the bustling Sun Moon sect disciples, but she felt lonely to the bone. She stood there in a daze as if the whole world had abandoned her. This time there were a total of 90 new disciples including Ning Xuema. The first 6 disciples chose their own masters. The next few disciples were taken in by other masters who wanted to take in disciples. They were all satisfied. Helian Shao also became Yelu Jing An's disciple. Yelu Jing An's first rule for him was that he was not allowed to think about the relationship between a man and a woman for 20 years. This made Helian Shao very depressed, but he could not say anything else. Ning Xuema was carried by Di Zun back to Tianin Peak in the blink of an eye. The scenery on the Tianin Peak was still the same, but Ning Xuema felt as if she had been away for a long time. When she saw the scenery here again, she felt a sense of familiarity. The thing she felt most at home with was the big bed in the side chamber. She was very tired. It was an extraordinary exhaustion. The day before yesterday she had not only broken through the dark forest, but also passed 6 trials in a row. She had not really rested yet. Yesterday she had fought several fierce battles in a row. For the entire day and night, she had been fighting. Even if she was made of iron, she still couldn't hold on much longer. Moreover, she had finally achieved her goal. The string that had been stretched taut in her heart was finally loosened. When she was brought back to Tianyin Peak by Di Zun, she almost couldn't open her eyes. Great God! No, Master, can I go and rest first? She felt that she could sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. When there's no one around, you can just call me by my old name. Shen Jiuli held Ning Xuema's hand and strode towards his sleeping quarters. Okay. Ning Xuema was very obedient when she was not provoked. She was sleepy and in a daze. When she walked into the sleeping quarters, she finally realized that something was wrong. She looked around and paused. Something was wrong. This was not her side chamber, but Di Zun's sleeping quarters. Chapter 878. According to Yelu Jing, without the ancestor's order, no one was allowed to enter this palace. Why did he bring her here? Ning Xuema was suspicious. The ancestor wanted to teach her here? Great God, I'm really tired and sleepy. Please give me 2 hours. I'll rest for 2 hours. Before she could finish her sentence, her body was suddenly lifted up by someone. She was startled and half drowsy. She subconsciously grabbed his clothes and said, Great God, you! The ancestor looked down at her. His eyes lingered on her face and sniffed her hair. He frowned slightly and said, You should take a bath. Ning Xuema was speechless. She really hadn't taken a bath for 2 days and 2 nights. She also wanted to take a bath, okay? Unfortunately, she couldn't spare any time for these 2 days. Now that the ancestor disliked her, her face turned red and she felt wronged. I also want to take a bath, but... Before she could finish her words, the ancestor interrupted her. No buts. Since you want to take a bath, I'll take you to take a bath. He turned around with her in his arms. Ning Xuema felt the scenery in front of her suddenly change. When she woke up, she saw a natural hot spring bubbling with steam. A hot spring. It seemed that she hadn't soaked in a hot spring for a long time. Strange, she had also wandered around Tianyin Peak once, so why didn't she find this hot spring? Ning Xuema forced herself to look at the scenery around her. The hot spring wasn't small. It was as big as a small pond and was surrounded by large trees with fiery red leaves. The leaves looked like maple leaves, but they were much redder than maple leaves. They shone brightly like a raging fire at the top of the trees. These trees that surrounded the hot spring were reflected in the water. They were fiery red from top to bottom, as warm as the setting sun. Didn't the great God dislike the color red? Why did he make such a hot spring? However, she really liked the scenery here. Half of her drowsiness was gone. Do you like it here? Shinjuli stood on the shore with her in his arms. The red leaves fluttered around them, creating a picturesque scene. Yes. Ning Xuema answered without hesitation. It's good that you like it. Wash up here. You're as dirty as a little ghost. Shinjuli put her down and ruffled her hair. He continued to tease her. Your hair is in a knot. Ning Xuema was speechless. She had not showered for 2 days and was sweating profusely. She did not have to be as dirty as a beggar, did she? She subconsciously looked at her reflection in the water. Her flower-like face was reflected in the water. Other than her slightly messy hair and wrinkled clothes, she was still beautiful. She looked at the ancestor again. His white robe was like snow, and his black hair was like satin. He was as clean and elegant as the pure white snow on the mountain, without a single flaw. His mask had been taken off, and his face was cold and handsome. At this moment, he was looking at her lazily, and there seemed to be a slight smile on his lips. Why are you looking at me? You want to invite me to bathe with you? Ning Xuema did not expect him to say something so immoral. The way he talked to her didn't change because of his identity. It was still the same as before. She coughed. Master, you're joking. How would disciple dare to bathe with master? Master, please leave. Disciple wants to take a good bath. The ancestor looked at her for a moment and finally said, Will you be shy if I'm here? Chapter 879. Isn't this nonsense? Ning Xuema secretly rolled her eyes. What kind of girl would let a man stand beside her and stare at her while she was bathing? The ancestor pondered for a moment and looked at her with a faint smile. Is there anything on your body that I haven't seen? You even danced in front of me before. Why are you being awkward now? Ning Xuema was speechless. Can he not mention that? I didn't even know he was peeping, okay? Master. Ning Xuema deliberately emphasized the word, master, to remind him of their identities. Master, at that time, I was your concubine. Being seen by you, well, it's reasonable. But now I'm not your concubine. I'm your disciple. Although master and disciple should be close, there are differences between men and women. It's better to avoid some taboos. Xun Jiuli looked at her for a moment. His eyes moved to the cinnabar mole on her forehead. Unexpectedly, he agreed very straightforwardly. Okay. He turned around and left. Ning Xuema breathed a sigh of relief. Watching his back disappear into the distance, she began to take off her clothes. It was already early winter. Although this place was close to the hot springs, the climate was still quite cold. Because she was sweating profusely, she didn't know how many times her clothes had been soaked through by her sweat. Now she really felt that her body was sticky. Since there was no one else here, she simply took off all her clothes. She didn't test the temperature of the water and directly jumped in. As soon as she jumped in, she immediately jumped out like a grasshopper thrown into a fire. Hot, hot, hot. Damn, it was scalding her. The temperature of the water was at least 80 to 90 degrees. She felt that a layer of her skin was going to be scalded off. She hurriedly checked her body and was stunned. Her skin was still soft and snow-white. There were no traces of being scalded. What's going on? Did her kung fu improve? Or was there a problem with this hot spring? Ning Xuema approached the hot spring again. This time she learned her lesson. First, she tested the temperature of the water with her feet. The temperature was actually neither hot nor cold. It was just the right temperature. Was it just an illusion? Ning Xuema was originally tired and sleepy. She couldn't wait to take a bath quickly and immediately throw herself on the big bed to have a good sleep. She didn't expect to encounter such a strange thing while taking a bath. She couldn't help but feel a little anxious. She stood naked on the shore and felt rather cold. After thinking about it, she decided that it would be safer to take a bath in the water. This time she didn't jump in. Instead, she looked at a rather shallow area and slowly entered the water. What she didn't expect was that when she put one foot into the water temperature was neither too cold nor too hot. But once she put both feet into the water, she immediately felt a strange burning sensation as if she had been electrocuted. She hurriedly retracted one of her legs and lifted it high above the water surface. Her beautiful posture of a golden rooster standing on one leg had finally gotten rid of the heat. But there was no way he could take a shower while standing on one leg like this. Perverted almighty. Couldn't they give her a more normal hot spring? She really wanted to quickly go to bed after soaking. Ning Xuema steeled her heart and wanted to go back to the shore. She might as well take a bath by the shore and not fight with this lousy hot spring anymore. Just as she turned around, she heard a voice by her ear. After entering the water, use the fire melting skill to circulate the fire psychokinesis in your body. This voice belonged to the Almighty. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. She was still naked. In a state of shock, she subconsciously sank her body into the water with a splash. Just as she entered the water, she felt so hot that she wanted to jump up. Chapter 880. Ning Xuemo recalled that Di Zun had mentioned the fire-melting technique, and she immediately activated it. Under the scorching heat outside, she activated the technique at an unprecedented speed. Strangely enough, as soon as the fire-melting technique started to circulate in her body, the scorching heat immediately disappeared. After a full cycle, she no longer felt the scorching heat. Instead, she felt warm and comfortable. It was several times better than soaking in a normal hot spring. She heaved a sigh of relief and opened her eyes to see where the Almighty was guiding her. But just as she opened her eyes, the fire-melting technique in her body naturally stopped. And with this pause, she immediately felt the scorching heat again. She hurriedly closed her eyes and activated the technique again. Strangely enough, when she activated the technique, not only was the surrounding water temperature normal, she could also feel a faint heat flow from the water into her body. Although she had dual spiritual roots, the wood spiritual root in her body was getting stronger and stronger. On the other hand, the fire spiritual root was not moving at all. She had previously tried to cultivate the fire element, but she had never succeeded. The fire spiritual root was pitifully short. Usually when she activated it, the most it could do was to provide warmth. There were no other major functions. But now, the heat from the hot spring began to enter her body as she activated the fire melting technique. It slowly revolved around the fire spiritual root in her body. After 2 full cycles, she used her inner vision to take a look. She was pleasantly surprised to find that her fire spiritual root was much brighter. The fire spiritual root was originally dim, but now it was bright red like a coral. It seemed that this hot spring was very effective for cultivating the fire element psychokinesis. This was a place with good feng shui. Dizun had brought Shuema here for her own good. Why didn't she see such a place with good feng shui before? Could it be that she was in some kind of enchantment? She was slightly distracted. This distraction was fine, but the fire melting technique in her body stopped operating again. The scorching heat attacked her and she almost jumped up again. Does it feel good to be scalded? Shinjuli's voice traveled to her ears again with a hint of teasing. Or do you like the feeling of being scalded? Ning Shuema. She knew that Dizun was teasing her for being distracted. This guy's words were always poisonous. He obviously said it for her own good, but he kept attacking her self-esteem. Even when she was slightly distracted, he could see it. Where exactly was he staring at her? How much could he see? Although most of her body was submerged in the water, with only her neck exposed, the water was super transparent. She had opened her eyes to see it once. Looking down from the water surface, the scenery below could be seen at a glance. Ning Shuema wanted to tell Dizun to hurry up and go do your things, don't stare here. He was staring at her, she was under pressure. If she knew it earlier, she woots. She even began to consider whether she should go ashore to get a doo-doo to wear. In this kind of situation, Shuema couldn't help but be distracted. If she was distracted, she would be scalded. But if she went ashore to get her clothes, she would be exposed. Thinking of her clothes, she thought of a more serious problem. She was directly carried here by Dizun, and she didn't have a change of clothes. His original clothes had been soaked in sweat a few times and smelled a little strange. He couldn't wear them anymore. Can't calm your heart? The ancestor's voice came again, this time from behind her. Chapter 881. Ning Shuema was shocked and almost jumped up. She turned around in the water and said, "You?" However, when she turned around halfway, a hand was placed on her shoulder and said, "Don't move. Do you want me to look in front of you?" Ning Shuema was speechless. She wanted to cry. "Master Almighty, can you let me have a good bath?" "Master." She reminded him of his identity again. She wanted to say something, but the heat immediately hit her and made her choke on her words. She hurriedly channeled her energy again. "Good girl," Shinjuli's voice was still slow, "I'll help you channel your energy. Don't be distracted again." His palm was pressed against her bare back, and a wisp of cold air entered Shuema's body, helping her to resist the scorching heat. With him channeling his energy behind her back, Shuema could finally speak. "Almighty, I can actually take a bath by myself. You can go ahead first if you have something to do." He was also in the water and his body was very close to hers. She could even smell the unique light fragrance on his body. His palm was pressed on her back, making her inexplicably nervous and her heart beat faster. "Me?" he repeated, and his voice was slightly higher at the end. He added, "Although I'm very busy, you're too easy to get into trouble. I'm afraid that once I turn around you'll be dizzy again. So, no matter how busy I am, I can only stay here and watch." Ning Shuema was speechless. She looked at her naked body and thought about the scenery behind her back. She was a little confused. "Master, we shouldn't touch each other, let alone look at each other's naked bodies." Dizun responded and shamelessly asked, "What do you mean by don't touch each other?" He was so knowledgeable, how could he not know what don't touch each other meant? Ning Shuema was speechless. She gritted her teeth and said, "It means that men and women can't have physical contact. Even if they pass something to each other, they can't touch each other's skin." "I see." The ancestor acted as if he had just been taught a lesson. Suddenly, a brocade handkerchief appeared out of nowhere and placed it under his palm. "All right, let's not touch each other." Ning Shuema. She almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Why didn't she realize that the usually lofty ancestor was so thick-skinned? "Master, have you always taught your disciples like this?" Ning Shuema secretly gritted her teeth. She was being teased by her cold master at that. "You're an exception." Shinjuli answered indifferently and added, "After all, you are the only one who is destined to be alone. You are the only one who became a concubine first and then a disciple." "Master, I remember that you hate relationships between master and disciple." Ning Shuemo reminded him. "Yes, I didn't like it at first." The ancestor answered honestly. That was just how he was. Even when he didn't care, he would still abide by the rules of the secular world. But once he cared, all the rules in this world were fleeting clouds to him. Ning Xuema understood the meaning behind his words. Master, do you mean that you like her now? When I meet a suitable disciple, it's not a bad idea to have a relationship between master and disciple. Shen Jiuli answered naturally as if he was eating cabbage. Ning Xuema. Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't understand the Almighty's thoughts. Almighty, a relationship between master and disciple is taboo. Aren't you afraid of being criticized by the world? I do my own thing. Who has time to care about other people's mouths? Shen Jiuli asked back. Chapter 882. The ancestor had never cared about what the world thought of him. He had done many shocking things in the past. However, he had the halo of the great god. No matter what he did, the world would think that he had a deeper meaning. The more they couldn't figure him out, the more mysterious he was. This was the culture of the strong. Once one stood at the top, the world could only worship him. Even the most outrageous things could be beautified. Therefore, he added, who dares to gossip about me? Ning Xuema said, they naturally don't dare to gossip about you, but has the great god ever thought about my reputation? My reputation on this continent is already very bad. Trash, jinx, and maybe in the future there will be a vixen who seduced my master. Wrong. Shen Jiuli corrected her, it should be a vixen who was seduced by my master. Ning Xuema said, isn't it the same? Great god, don't care about those small details, okay? Xuema, do you agree? Shen Jiuli pressed his palms on her back. He was channeling energy for her while chatting with her. Agree to what? Ning Xuema was a little confused. Shen Jiuli's lips curved slightly behind her and he said 3 words, a master-disciple relationship. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. When did she agree to it? Where did this conclusion come from? As if he sensed Ning Xuema's thoughts, Shen Jiuli spoke again, you're thinking about the impact and consequences of a master-disciple relationship. This proves that you have me in your heart and want to be in a relationship with me. Ning Xuema was stunned. The great god's reasoning was so intrepid. She subconsciously said, great god, you think too much. I don't want a master-disciple relationship. A master-disciple relationship was so bitter. The master was cold and the disciple was humble. Maybe the master would even stab the disciple a few times for the sake of the world. As for Shen Jiuli, he was a true god and also the representative of Emperor Gaolang. If she fell in love with him, wouldn't she be tortured to death? No, in those sadomasochistic novels about master and disciple relationships, there was no such thing as a cold master flirting with his disciple. Almighty, why didn't you take the conventional route? You're making me lose my sense of direction. So you haven't thought about this? Shen Jiuli's voice was still steady. You don't have to think about it, just do it in the future. Ning Xuema was speechless. She couldn't help but look back at Shen Jiuli. Shen Jiuli's hand was still on her back. He lowered his eyes and looked at her. His expression was calm and his bearing was noble. After she looked at him a few more times, he slowly said, what are you looking at? Are you really a god? Ning Xuema felt as if he had been possessed by Rong Yuetian. His style seemed different from usual. Shen Jiuli smiled faintly, what do you think? Well, although the style was different, she could be sure that it was him. It wasn't because of the appearance but because of the feeling. Her feelings had always been accurate. She was stubborn, it looks fake. After all, you have a substitute. Do you think I'm still a substitute? Shen Jiuli narrowed his eyes dangerously. That's hard to say. Ning Xuema purposely angered him. However, as soon as she finished speaking, her body was suddenly pulled by a force. She couldn't help but fall back into his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her slightly opened red lips. The familiar breath that made her heart palpitate rushed to her face. Ning Xuema was forced to tilt her head back slightly. He fixed one hand on her waist and the other hand on her chin. He kissed her thoroughly. Chapter 883. Ning Xuema's head exploded. She wanted to struggle and push him away, but her hands were powerless. Her heart was beating like a drum and her body was weak. She almost collapsed in his arms. His kiss seemed to have a hallucinogenic effect. Ning Xuema's usually smart brain went blank, and she couldn't remember anything for a while. This passionate kiss lasted for a long time. After about 5 to 6 minutes, the sound of water splashing could be heard. Finally, Ning Xuema was startled back to her senses. Then she realized what kind of scene she was in. She bent her body like a bow, which inevitably exposed her chest. At this moment she was naked. When he kissed her, his eyes must have taken advantage of her tofu. This position, that scene was too beautiful. She didn't dare to imagine it. God. Too bold and unrestrained. Especially when one of his arms was still around her waist, and his palm was pressed on her lower abdomen. His little finger was slightly lower and had already touched a mysterious area. Bang. Ning Xuema's face turned red. She pushed him away and wanted to push him away again, but with her current strength she was no match for him. Not only did she not push him away, but she also fell into his arms. Xuema. The Dizun hugged her tightly. There seemed to be a faint flame in the depths of his eyes. The eyes of the girl in his arms were watery, her face was red, and her lips were moist like cherry blossoms. He didn't know if it was because she was soaking in the hot spring water or because she was nervous and shy, but her whole body was pale pink. Her skin was like fine porcelain, smooth to the touch. She was lying in his arms like this. Even if Lu Xiaohui was alive, he would not be able to control himself. Shen Jiuli's palms suddenly became hot. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pressed her tightly against his body. Xuema? His voice was slightly hoarse. Although he was still wearing a robe, Ning Xuema was still in his arms and could feel the obvious changes in his body. God, he wouldn't want to take her here, right? Ning Xuema's face became hotter, and her heart became more flustered. She couldn't help but struggle. Shen Jiuli's breathing became heavier when she did not move. Don't move, he shouted. His body was burning hot. Ning Xuema was in his arms and her face was even hotter. Fortunately, he seemed to be naturally adapted to the hot spring. Xuema lay in his arms and could no longer feel the heat of the hot spring, but her heart felt like it was about to jump out. Let me go first. She had originally wanted to reprimand him, but in the end not only did her voice sound a little hoarse, it also trembled as if she was acting coquettishly. Ning Xuema was also stunned when she said it herself, and her face became hot again. Shen Jiuli coughed and attributed his abnormal behavior to the fact that she was not wearing clothes and was not as confident as usual. Xuema, hurry up and level up. Shen Jiuli's breathing was somewhat unstable. He was born without any desires, but he did not expect that after he met her, he would have the desire of a normal man. He wanted to have her, he wanted to rub her into his body. That kind of desire was something he had never experienced before. However, there was an inexplicable familiar feeling that made him dazed for a moment. In his life he rarely controlled his emotions. He was more carefree and did whatever he wanted. Basically, he would do whatever he wanted and would not let himself suffer. But now he had to control himself. For the sake of the future he had to control himself. Shen Jiuli secretly took a breath. Chapter 884. Shen Jiuli finally let go of her, but he was afraid that she would jump up from the heat again, so he slid his palm onto Xuema's back. Be obedient and adjust your breathing according to my instructions. It will be very beneficial for you. After experiencing such a passionate kiss and a hot hug, Ning Xuema felt that his presence was even stronger now that he was behind her. Especially when his palm was still burning, and the warmth seemed to be directly transmitted to her heart. Great God, I can do it myself. Ning Xuema wanted him to leave. Stop talking nonsense. With me here you'll be able to adapt faster. The ancestor regained his calm tone. He was used to being high and mighty, so he spoke with a condescending tone. Ning Xuema's body stiffened slightly, and she turned to look at him. She pursed her lips but didn't say anything. Shen Jiuli probably also realized that his tone was stiff, so he coughed lightly. This hot spring is actually a bit dangerous. If you are not careful you may be scalded. You have also been drowned before. Don't worry, I won't touch you. I will only help you heal. His gaze fell on Xuema's leg under the water. There was still a faint scar there. Although it had already healed, it was still a serious injury, so the new flesh and skin inside was still different from the normal skin around it. During the fight, Ning Xuema's mind was extremely tense and momentarily forgot about the injuries on her body. Now that her mind had completely relaxed, she felt that her muscles were tired and aching. It was as if all the bones in her body had been disassembled. It was rare for him to explain so much, and Ning Xuema's heart moved. She was indeed afraid of being drowned, so after hearing him say so, she didn't say anything else. She used to be a person who was used to bossing others around, but after coming to this world, she frequently tasted the malice of the world. which changed her temperament a little. For example, right now she didn't want to fight for something that didn't exist. She closed her eyes, gathered her thoughts, and began to circulate her energy according to the methods he said. After channeling her energy, she finally realized the benefits of having the Almighty behind her. The psyche power that he transferred to her was controlled very well. It was neither too big nor too small, and it was just right to follow her own nashi and wander in her body. Wherever it passed, it was like dry land being watered by sweet dew. Her tight muscles finally relaxed and felt very comfortable. After 3 circulations, Ning Xuema's fatigue had mostly disappeared, and the soreness in her injured muscles had also eased a lot. After all, she had been risking her life for too long. After soaking in the hot spring for a while, she was so sleepy that she couldn't open her eyes. Her head was nodding, and she looked like she was about to fall asleep at any moment. Tired and sleepy? Sleep if you're sleepy. Shinjuli gently stroked her hair with his other hand. I'll sleep when I get back. Ning Xuema mumbled. She didn't dare to sleep. It was very dangerous to sleep in the water. He might drown again. I'm here. I won't let you drown. I'm afraid. Ning Xuema was actually very sleepy, but she still forced herself to talk. It was as if she had one eye open even in her sleep. What are you afraid of? Why are you still afraid when I'm here? Shinjuli's voice was a little deep. Yes, I shouldn't be afraid when you're here. Her voice gradually became softer. It was obvious that she was so sleepy that she couldn't find her bearings. But what? But you'll leave me behind? I don't want to be left behind again. I said before. I have to rely on myself for everything. Chapter 885. Shinjuli's fingers trembled slightly. He naturally knew what Ning Xuema meant. That time when Yi Qingwan captured her, she waited bitterly for reinforcements. Although these memories had been forcibly removed by him, the shadow remained in her bones. It made her subconsciously not trust anyone. This was not something that could be removed in a short period of time. Could only be done slowly. Shinjuli secretly sighed and whispered, "Don't worry, it won't happen. I don't like to be forced. You have to respect my opinion." Ning Xuema muttered again. Shinjuli's eyes moved slightly. He paused for a moment and said, "Okay." He knew that Xuema had always been a very opinionated girl. She was also the only person on the continent who dared to raise conditions in front of him. He was the most powerful person on the continent. He didn't like to explain anything. He was used to using the fastest means to solve things. He rarely considered other people's feelings. And after treating her this way, it seemed to have caused a lot of unnecessary conflicts. While they were talking, Ning Xuema took a nap in the water. Her body swayed. Fortunately, Shinjuli was behind her and supported her in time. She didn't plunge into the water. Shinjuli couldn't help but want to laugh. He also felt a little distressed. He was stunned. I actually have this kind of distressed feeling. This made him feel very strange. It was also the first time that he saw Xuema so sleepy. It was obvious that she had been working very hard these 2 days. Ning Xuema also came back to her senses. She suddenly pinched herself to make herself more energetic. She forced her eyelids open. I'd better go back to sleep. Since she insisted, Shinjuli didn't force her. Okay. He took her hand and walked to the shore. You go. Ning Xuema hugged her chest and squatted on the ground. She came back to her senses. Your clothes are here. Dizun pointed to a big rock next to him. Sure enough, there was a brand new set of clothes on it. Ning Xuema quickly and efficiently put on the clothes. Finally, she had some confidence. She looked all around her, but all she could see were bright red trees. She couldn't see the end of the trees. She didn't know where to go. Shinjuli held her hand and said, "Close your eyes." Ning Xuema felt relieved after leaving the water. As expected, he closed his eyes. Shinjuli pulled her into his arms. As the wind blew past her ears, she felt as if her body was floating in the clouds. A moment later, Shinjuli appeared in the bedroom with Xuema in his arms. "All right, open your eyes." For a long time there was still no movement. Shinjuli lowered his head to look at her in his arms. He saw that her eyelashes were slightly closed and her breathing was shallow. She had actually fallen asleep. He couldn't help but smile. His palm gently rubbed her hair. Her hair was still wet, but after being rubbed by him, it was dry. He was about to put her on his bed when he suddenly seemed to realize something. He turned around and appeared in the side hall where she used to live. He put her on the bed and covered her with a quilt. He stood there and looked at her for a moment before turning around and leaving. Inside a room that seemed to be made of ice, a man in white was sitting on a futon. He seemed to be meditating with his eyes closed. Suddenly he seemed to notice something. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the man in white who flashed in the door. He slowly stood up and bowed. The man in white was Shinjoli. He looked down at the man in white. His eyes were like snow. "Do you know your crime?" The man in white had the same figure as Shinjoli. When they both wore masks they looked like the same person. Chapter 886. The man in white was Di Zun's substitute. Even in his own room he wore a mask. When he heard Shinjoli's question he raised his head slightly and said, "Supreme Divinity, if you don't accept her as your disciple, I have a feeling that she might be your origin tribulation. Do I need you to tell me who I want to accept as my disciple?" Shinjoli's voice turned cold. "Supreme Divinity. She is not worth it." The man in white was unwilling to give up and wanted to persuade him again. Boom. Shinjoli suddenly raised his sleeve, and a light red wave flashed and shrouded the man in white. The man in white seemed to be tortured, and his whole body trembled slightly. Shinjoli's voice was as cold as snow. "Wumo, you have crossed the line." The man in white finally bowed down and said, You have been following me for more than 2,000 years, and you have always been very reliable. Therefore I trust you and use you. What did I tell you before I went into seclusion? Say it again." Shinjoli's eyes were shining. The man in white paused and finally said slowly, "Supreme Divinity told me to take good care of Miss Ning and prepare the food that Supreme Divinity has already planned for her. I will take her out of the dark forest and let her become your disciple openly. If I disobey, I will be punished by being imprisoned in the soul-grinding valley for a year." Shinjoli said lightly, "In that case you can go and accept your punishment." He turned around and was about to leave. "Supreme Divinity, I don't mind the punishment, but I want to say that this woman is most likely the origin tribulation of Supreme Divinity. You must be careful of her." Shinjoli turned around slowly. He looked at Shinjoli's face coldly and said, "My fate is not determined by the heavens. You talk too much." He waved his sleeve again and the light red light around Wu Mo suddenly tightened. Wu Mo's throat hurt and his voice was broken. "Go and accept your punishment." Shinjoli said and turned around to leave. Wu Mo slowly sat down on the cattail hassock and closed his eyes slightly. This was the first time he had received such a big punishment since he started following the ancestor. However, this was an oath he had made to the ancestor long ago. Now that he had violated the oath, it was only natural for him to be punished. He had already expected this outcome, so he wasn't surprised. However, he did not regret it. If he could do it all over again, he would do it again. After he sat down, he formed a seal with his fingertips. A moment later, a whirlpool that seemed to contain countless weapons appeared in the void. The whirlpool slowly pressed down on him and gradually swallowed his entire body. He was nowhere to be seen in the ice room. The black gas in the soul-grinding valley surged violently. Every wisp of black gas was a rope that would tightly bind him inside. Every night he would suffer the pain of the black gas pouring into his head. That feeling was like being skinned alive. It was abnormally painful. He would not be free unless he left the valley. After Wu Mo disappeared, Shinjoli reappeared in the ice room. He stood there and looked at the place where Wu Mo had disappeared. His eyes were faintly complicated. A moment later he turned around and left. Ning Shuama had a good sleep. She slept from early in the morning until the sun set. When she woke up, the sky was already filled with stars. She opened her eyes and saw the bed curtain in front of her. Her heart skipped a beat and she looked around again. The room was decorated in a very familiar way. This was the side hall where she used to live, and not the ancestor's bedroom. Ning Shuama's memory was still stuck at the moment when the ancestor carried her back to the room after soaking in the hot spring. Chapter 887. Ning Shuama thought that Di Zun would directly carry her back to his palace, but it turned out that he sent her to his own side chamber. This was a bit out of her expectations, but it also made her feel relieved. Her current identity was special, and if she really slept on the same bed with him, she would feel very uncomfortable. She first sensed her body. After all, she was too tired and her body was still sore. Fortunately, she didn't feel that kind of soreness after resting. It seemed that soaking in the hot spring was still very beneficial. Then she sensed the psychokinesis in her body. She was pleasantly surprised to find that the fire spiritual root was much thicker than before. It was originally only the size of a little finger, but now it was as thick and long as a middle finger. She estimated that if she cultivated for a few more days, it would level up. And the wood spiritual root was even more luxuriant, green like jade. Looking internally, it was more than 2 feet long, and it looked very pleasing to the eye. According to this momentum, if she cultivated for another 8 to 10 days, she estimated that she would be able to level up to Earth rank level 3. She finally got rid of her identity as a good-for-nothing. She finally got rid of her identity as a concubine. Aha, from now on she would create her own world. Ning Xuema's heart was filled with joy. She couldn't help but dance a few steps on the bed. Then, with a spin, she landed on the ground. She looked at the clothes on her body. She was too tired this morning, so she almost closed her eyes and put on the clothes without looking at the style. Now she could see that the style of the clothes was very simple, but it was very fitting. It was soft and comfortable to wear. It was very obvious that this was an ancient version of pajamas. She washed up and opened a closet in the room. She found that there was actually a neat stack of new clothes inside. There were all kinds of colors: fiery red, light blue, light pink. It was too much for Ning Xuema's eyes to take in. Did the great god prepare this for her? Xuema's heart was filled with a warm feeling. She picked a set, put it on neatly, and ran out of the side chamber. She was hungry, so she wanted to find something to eat. While she was at it, she also wanted to greet the great god. After all, he was now her master, so she should still have the proper etiquette. Just as she stepped out of the door, her feet paused. In the twilight, Shinjoli was sitting at a small table under a grape trellis in her courtyard. There was tea and pastries on the table. He was sitting there drinking tea. He was not wearing a mask. The wind lifted his long hair and the corners of his robe, making them flutter. When he saw Ning Xuema come out, he looked her up and down. "You look good." He then gestured to the seat opposite him with his chin. "Sit." Ning Xuema sat down across from him. She thought of his injuries and looked at his complexion. He didn't look too bad. His lips were red and his teeth were white. It seemed that he had fully recovered after a few days of seclusion. Ning Xuema was finally relieved. She looked at the pastries on the table. They were sparkling and fragrant. It was even steaming. She didn't need to taste it. Just by smelling it, she knew that these pastries were her dishes and that they suited her taste. She looked at Shinjoli, who was sitting opposite her. He was drinking tea and had no intention of eating the pastries. Obviously, he had prepared them for her. Her heart warmed again. These pastries are not bad. As she spoke, she felt even hungrier. She raised her hand to take a piece, but Shinjoli took out a white jade flute from nowhere and held it against her wrist. Her hand could no longer move. Ning Xuema looked at him in confusion. He didn't want her to eat? Shinjoli said lightly, "This is a prize. You can't eat it now." "What prize?" Ning Xuema was surprised. Chapter 888. Shinjoli raised his sleeves and a chessboard appeared on the table. "If you win, you can eat a piece of cake." Ning Xuema raised her eyebrows. "What if I lose?" She didn't have much chance of winning against him, so she had to ask first. "You haven't even played yet and you're already asking if you lose. Is that all you have?" Ning Xuema didn't fall for his provocation. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. "It's better to be straightforward. It's very simple. If you win, you can eat a piece of cake. If I win, you have to answer one of my questions truthfully. It seems that I'm at a disadvantage. If I win, I'll get a piece of cake. If I win, I want a plate of cakes." Ning Xuema's gaze fell on the cakes. Each of them was small, like dice, and not enough to fill the gaps between her teeth. A plate was more like it. "Are you bargaining with me?" The ancestor smiled. "If you win, you can eat 3 cakes. However, if you lose, not only do you have to answer one of my questions, but you also have to give me a small reward." The ancestor also wants a reward? She had nothing on her, and even the clothes she was wearing were prepared for her by him. The ancestor had already arranged the chessboard and handed the black agate pieces to her. "Don't worry, the reward is something you can give at any time. It's very easy." "Then it's still not worth it. If I win, you have to allow me to ask a question." This little girl really didn't want to lose out at all. The ancestor chuckled and tapped the chessboard with his finger. "All right, it's up to you." After discussing the conditions, the two sat opposite each other and played chess. Once they entered the game, Ning Xuema was fully focused. She didn't dare to be distracted. In the game, the Almighty didn't give in to her at all. If she didn't pay attention, she would fall into his trap. The great god treated her as a real opponent to kill, and Ning Xuema was not someone who would give way to others. This game of chess lasted for more than 2 hours before the dust settled. Ning Xuema lost by a difference of 2 suns. Ning Xuema was also someone who was willing to admit defeat. What do you want to ask? Why didn't you use the sound-transmitting talisman I gave you when you were in danger? The ancestor's question was super simple. You must have been seriously injured when you suddenly disappeared. You needed to go into seclusion to heal your wounds. It's taboo to be disturbed while you're in seclusion. Besides, I also want to win this battle with my own abilities, Ning Xuema answered straightforwardly. Shenjiu Lu's eyes flickered slightly. So you are mainly afraid of disturbing me? There seemed to be a smile on his lips as he beckoned to her. Come here. Ning Xuema looked at him warily. What are you doing? Shenjiuli's gaze fell on the space between her eyebrows as if he was thinking, that space between your eyebrows? There seems to be something wrong? Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. Between her eyebrows, there was a cinnabar mole that represented a heavenly marriage. Now something was wrong. Could it be that after she became his disciple she was no longer his concubine, so that cinnabar mole disappeared? She couldn't help but raise her hand to touch it, but she didn't feel anything unusual. The cinnabar mole was still there. Great God, wasn't our engagement cancelled? Why is it still there? Shenjiuli tapped on the chessboard lightly. Good question. When you win I can answer you this as a reward. He simply stood up, walked in front of her and pulled her up. His eyes stared at her forehead. Ning Xuema was scared by his stare. What's going on? Before she could finish her words, Shenjiuli pulled her into his arms and pressed his warm lips on her forehead. Ning Xuema only felt a heat on her forehead, as if a wisp of electric current had entered, which made her heart jump. She subconsciously pushed him. You. Chapter 889. Unexpectedly, Di Zun let go of her easily this time. He turned around and sat back in front of his seat. Just a small reward. So this was the reward he wanted. Ning Xuema touched her forehead. The cinnabar mole didn't hurt or itch, so she didn't feel anything unusual. She looked at him suspiciously. Guru, you didn't do anything wrong, right? Shenjiuli looked at her lazily. What do you want me to do when I kiss your forehead? He muttered. Or, you actually want me to do something wrong? Ning Xuema was speechless. Guru, you've lost your integrity. Forget it, it's just a kiss on the forehead. This reward isn't too much. However, she seemed to be even hungrier. She even made a grumbling sound. The sound was loud enough that Ning Xuema felt a little uncomfortable. She wanted him to hear it, but at the same time she didn't want him to hear it. She was really hungry. Shenjiuli didn't seem to hear it. Instead, he slowly ate 3 pieces of pastries. Then he knocked on the chessboard with his hand. Second game. He really didn't want to be flexible. Ning Xuema's stubborn temper also rose. She took a deep breath, her nose pointed to her mouth, and her mouth pointed to her heart, suppressing her hunger. The two of them started the second game. This time, Ning Xuema played very carefully. In order to fill her stomach, she went all out. She used all her skills. After all, she was hungry, and there were pastries beside her constantly attracting her attention. After half an hour, she lost again by a single piece. As a result, Ning Xuema looked on helplessly as he ate another 3 pieces of pastries. While he was at it, he leisurely kissed the tip of her nose and answered his rather perverted question. Have you missed me these days? Although she was willing to accept her loss, Ning Xuema's heart was still a bit angry. Therefore she smiled and replied with a satisfied tone, Yes, I do. I really do. Although Shenjiuli was used to being expressionless, at this moment, his pair of blue eyes flashed with a faint smile. Obviously he was very satisfied with her answer. Ning Xuema added, I want to know how you developed such a perverted personality. Shenjiuli was speechless. The smile in his eyes disappeared. He knocked on the chessboard with his finger. Continue. In the third game, Shenjiuli suddenly changed his usual style of chess. His attacks were fierce and merciless. Especially his momentum in the game, it was extremely oppressive. Ning Xuema was startled by his sudden change in chess style. Furthermore, the invisible aura emitted from his body made her unable to breathe. Her heartbeat inexplicably thundered. Thus she lost again. She lost by 4 or 5 stones. After this game of chess, Ning Xuema felt as if she had fought a tough battle. Coupled with her hunger, beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Thus, she watched as the 3 pieces of pastries entered his mouth, and the fire in her heart started to burn. She was going to starve to death. Could it be that the Almighty would not go easy on her at all? Even a piece of cake to fill her stomach would be good. This time Shinjuli kissed her on the cheek. Ning Shuema's face was expressionless as she allowed him to kiss her. The first 2 times he kissed her she was a little nervous. This time it was different. Shinjuli looked at her expression. Are you angry? I didn't. Ning Shuemo replied stiffly. It's good that you're not angry. Then answer me a question. You. He was about to ask the 3rd question. Ning Shuema interrupted him. You've already asked. You can't ask any more. Shinjuli paused for a moment and smiled. He did not smile easily, but this smile was like a flower blooming. Okay, I'll take it that I asked. Chapter 890. Ning Shuema was dazzled by his smile. Then, she looked away and fell on the remaining 3 pieces of pastries on the table. She calmed herself down and said, again. She didn't believe that she would keep losing. She didn't believe that she couldn't eat a piece of pastry. Playing chess is like practicing martial arts. The most important thing to avoid is being impatient. No matter what situation you encounter, you must remember not to mess up your position, Shinjuli suddenly said. Ning Shuema pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Her fingers squeezed the agate chess piece tightly as she thought about her next move. She was particularly cautious in this game. She advanced step by step and didn't give in at all. This game of chess took a long time to play. Ning Shuema hadn't eaten for a day. She played chess until midnight. Although she had been holding it in, her stomach didn't live up to her expectations. From time to time, it would growl to remind her of its existence. In the quiet night, the sound was very clear. Ning Shuema was embarrassed and angry. She inhaled and exhaled to suppress the hunger that was getting more and more serious. After her stomach growled again, Shinjuli finally looked at her and said with a faint smile, Do you want me to give you a handicap? Ning Shuema was also stubborn. No need. You're ambitious. Shinjuli nodded his head and praised her. It was a compliment. He didn't show any mercy this time. He also gave his all. If he was serious about playing chess, no one would be his opponent. Rangi Yuishinlin couldn't either. The reason why he occasionally lost to Rangi Yuishinlin once or twice was because he was afraid that Rangi Yuishinlin would lose too badly and never play with him again. Therefore the old Dizun played chess casually. Once he got serious, his opponent would only be defeated by him. Most of the time he played chess for fun. Because his chess skills were too good, it wasn't easy for him to cultivate Rangi Yuishinlin, an opponent who could play chess with him. Therefore he valued this friend very much. Shinjuli thought that he wouldn't meet a second opponent who could make him serious, but he didn't expect to meet such a freak like Ning Shuema. Her chess skills were so high at such a young age. As long as he was distracted for a moment, she would have the opportunity to take a few bites from him. Thus, after he witnessed Ning Shuema's chess skills at Rongyue Tianlan's Carefree Island, he had the idea of training her as a chess opponent. This way, once his chess addiction kicked in, he wouldn't have to travel thousands of miles to find Rongyue Tianlan to PK. When the game was about to end, Shinjuli raised his eyes to look at her tense little face. His fingers paused slightly, and for the first time he began to consider whether he should give her a handicap. Firstly, he didn't like to eat this kind of pastry and he was a little sick of it after eating a few pieces. Secondly, if this little girl didn't eat a single piece she might really get angry. But there is no father and son on the chessboard. Naturally, there was no lover on the chessboard. She had just said that giving in on the chessboard was a sign of disrespect to the opponent. Forget it, I won't allow it. It was rare to meet someone who could make him use all his energy to play chess. How could he not play to his heart's content? And so, in the end, Ning Shuema lost by a single piece. You lost. The Dizun raised his head. Ning Shuema took a deep breath and stood up. Yes, I lost. Congratulations. She looked up at the sky. It was already 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. She had played chess with the great god for nearly an entire night for the sake of pastries, but in the end she had completely lost. She didn't even get a single piece of pastry in her mouth. She had smelled the flavor of pastries all night for nothing. Yes, one must be willing to accept defeat. There was no such thing as father and son on the chessboard. Chapter 891. She knew that there was no such thing as father and son in a game of chess. However, there was still a fire burning in her heart. She felt wronged. She took another deep breath and turned to leave. She wanted to go down Tianin Peak to look for food. She was starving. Wait. Shinjuli stopped her from behind. Is there anything else? Ning Xuema didn't even want to turn her head. You haven't fulfilled your bet. Shinjuli did things by the book. Ning Xuema was speechless. The fire in her heart burned even brighter. She turned around and said, "Okay, I'll fulfill my bet." She deliberately didn't look at the remaining 3 pieces of pastries, lest she couldn't help but pick them up and slap them on his face. Shinjuli looked at her angry face. It seemed that she was really angry. He raised his hand and picked up a piece of pastry. "I can give you a piece of pastry, but you have to take the initiative to kiss me." Ning Xuema paused and pursed her lips. "In your dreams. You really don't want it? Humph. Don't regret it." Shinjuli spoke slowly. "Don't." This time, Ning Xuema's tone became heavier. "Then forget it." Shinjuli didn't force her and slowly ate the remaining 3 pieces. Ning Xuema saw that he really ate it, and the fire in her heart was about to burn into magma. The grievance in her heart surged and she tightly closed her mouth. She didn't know why, but she had a faint sense of familiarity with this scene. Dizun didn't want to let her go. "This pastry is made of 1,000-year-old Solomon's seal. Eating 1 piece can increase your psychokinesis by at least 10 years. He didn't start to explain the effect of the pastry until now. Ning Xuema was speechless. She clenched her fingers in her sleeves. "However, to be able to get a piece of this pastry by kissing me once, this transaction couldn't be more profitable, but you gave up this opportunity in a fit of pique. Xuema, this isn't like you." The ancestor's eyes rested on her. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't a person who got angry easily. No matter what she encountered, she could calmly analyze the situation and then choose the most beneficial to herself. She had never been angry with anyone before because she felt that this kind of behavior was somewhat childish. She also didn't think that there would be a day when she would be so childish. It was reasonable to say that Dizun hadn't gone overboard in his actions. If she had encountered this kind of situation in the past, Ning Xuema would never have chosen to act rashly. She could either give him a kiss or laugh it off. But now she was angry and she didn't regret it at all. What did this mean? She couldn't figure it out for a moment. She focused all her attention on suppressing her boiling anger. That was why she kept a straight face and didn't say anything. Shinjuli clapped his hands and brushed off the pastry crumbs. He walked to her step by step. He was tall, and when they stood facing each other, Xuema's figure seemed particularly petite. "Then I'll ask you a question. Do you like me?" He finally asked the question he cared about the most. He knew that Ning Xuema didn't hate him, but he really didn't know whether she liked him or not, or whether she loved him or not. He really couldn't feel it. Ning Xuema froze, but then she smiled and glanced at him. "Dizun, you already asked me a question, so I won't answer this question." Shinjuli was stunned. What did he ask? Ning Xuema reminded him, "You just asked me if I really didn't want it. My answer was no. That counted." Shinjuli was stunned. Chapter 892. It was a rare sight to see him suffer a setback. Ning Xuema's indescribable anger seemed to dissipate a little bit. Shinjuli suddenly took a step forward. Ning Xuema couldn't help but take a step back. However, she looked up at him, unwilling to admit defeat. She didn't break the rules. He had already asked, so she didn't have to answer him. Stubborn little girl. Shinjuli pulled her into his arms. Ning Xuema felt uncomfortable and couldn't help but struggle. "Don't move. I'm just taking back my own little benefit." Shinjuli looked at her. Their faces were very close. His breath lingered on her face. Ning Xuema closed her eyes. "Take it." Wasn't it just another peck on her forehead and cheeks like a dragonfly skimming the water? She didn't care. Suddenly, something soft touched her tightly pursed lips. He said in a low voice, "Be good, open your mouth." Her nose was filled with the fragrance of pastries. She didn't open her mouth. Instead, she opened her eyes and saw that he was sending a piece of sparkling pastry to her lips. Ning Xuema suddenly felt wronged. She turned her face away. "I don't want it." She lost. She didn't want this handout food. However, as soon as she opened her mouth, Shinjuli stuffed the pastry in his hand into her mouth. She subconsciously wanted to spit it out, but his lips suddenly pressed down. His kiss was so strong that Xuema couldn't push him away even if she wanted to. Because she struggled, he held her even tighter. After he sent the pastry into her mouth, the tip of his tongue forced hers to dance together. The pastry melted in her mouth. The fresh and sweet fragrance was dense in their mouths. After a while, Shinjuli finally let go of her. Ning Xuema suddenly took a step back. The pastry had already slipped into her stomach. It was strange that such a small piece of pastry made her poor stomach feel full. She glared at him, her heart thumping non-stop. She didn't know what to feel. She paused for a moment before saying, "All right, I've already exchanged all my bets for you." She turned around and left. "Where are you going?" "Look for food." Ning Xuemo replied stiffly. Her figure flashed out of the courtyard. She probably went down the peak. It seemed that she had really pissed her off. However, with her current physique, she could only eat one piece of this kind of pastry a day at most. Otherwise, not only would she waste the 1,000-year-old seal wort, but she would also have problems. This was also the reason why he had said that he would bet a piece of cake at the beginning. He had originally wanted Xuema to win a small round, but she had changed the bet. So for the sake of her life, he couldn't let her win no matter what. Of course, he could also explain all these reasons to Xuema. Firstly, he was too lazy to explain. Secondly, this kind of pastry had to be nourished in his storage space with telekinesis. He couldn't let her keep it by herself. So, Shinjuli sat in the same place for a moment. He took out a sound-transmitting spell and connected Rongyue Tianlan. After a while, Rongyue Tianlan's dying voice came from the sound-transmitting spell. "Dizun, it's the middle of the night. Do you have any urgent instructions?" I used the sealwort cake as an excuse to play chess with Xuema in the middle of the night. As expected, I managed to get some of her inner thoughts. However, she was a little angry. Of course, there were some things that couldn't be said to Rongyue. Shinjuli not only asked some of Xuema's inner thoughts, but also took advantage of her. Chapter 893. Rongyu suddenly thought of something and asked, "Dizwa, how many rounds did you win?" "How many rounds did she win?" Shinjuli paused and said, "I didn't let her win, so she didn't win a single round." Rongyu Tianlan was speechless. No wonder the girl was angry. Anyone would be angry. He couldn't help but rub his eyebrows. "Dizwa, you should at least let her win a round. If you really treat her as a disciple, it's fine even if you torture her 1,000 times. But if you want the girl to fall in love with you, this won't do. However, being angry because of this proves that she unknowingly cares about you." Rongyu Tianlan chattered on and on with the sound transmission talisman for a long time, but there was no response from the other side. He was a little surprised and looked down. His head was full of black lines. He didn't know when the ancestor had cut off the sound transmission talisman. He had wasted so many sutras to pick up girls. Ning Xuemo ran down the heavenly sound peak and went straight to the kitchen. Although she didn't feel hungry anymore after eating the pastry, she still felt that it wasn't enough to fill her up. Sometimes people mainly ate to satisfy their mouths. Xuema felt that her mouth was still hungry, and there was some good food in the kitchen. She could get some to eat. If she had known that she couldn't win a single round, she wouldn't have wasted so much effort on him. However, Xuema forgot that it was the middle of the night. The disciples in the kitchen were still resting and didn't open the door. She pounced on empty air. Looking at the closed door, she had no choice but to leave. She didn't want to go back to the heavenly sound peak at the moment. She wanted to walk around nearby. There was a lot of bamboo on Buddha Lotus Mountain. Bamboo forests could be seen everywhere. She wandered around casually and occasionally met the patrolling disciples of the Sun Moon sect. She was now very famous in the Sun Moon sect. During the last few rounds of the competition, many disciples of the Sun Moon sect were present and saw her skills. Therefore, almost all the disciples here knew her. When they met on the road, they immediately greeted her respectfully and called her Grand Marshal Aunt. She was speechless. It couldn't be helped. The disciples patrolling the mountain were basically the grand disciples of the ancestors' grand disciples, and Ning Xuema was now the ancestor's direct disciple, so it wasn't wrong to call her Marshal Granduncle. Ning Xuema had always liked to pretend to be young. Now that she was suddenly promoted to an ancestor, she felt like she was suddenly called Grandma on the street. She suddenly felt a sense of vicissitudes. She couldn't help but touch her own face, afraid that she would touch a bunch of wrinkles. Fortunately, her cheeks were still tender when she touched them, which made her feel a little relieved. In order to prevent others from calling her Marshal Granduncle a few times, she turned around and found a secluded place to wander around. In any case, they were in the Sun Moon sect's territory. No matter how secluded the place was, there wouldn't be any bandits or monsters appearing. It was very safe. After a few twists and turns, she arrived at a hillside. There was a large patch of xiangfei bamboo here, which rustled in the night. Ning Xuema liked the fragrance of the bamboo, so she walked over. Her nose was filled with the refreshing fragrance of the bamboo. Ning Xuema took a deep breath and felt that the inexplicable anger in her heart suddenly dissipated by quite a bit. When she thought about it carefully, her anger seemed to have arisen for no reason. There was no such thing as father and son on the chessboard. There was no room for compromise. This was what they had agreed on earlier. It seemed a little strange for her to be angry at him just because she lost a few rounds. Why was she becoming more and more petty? It really wasn't like her. Chapter 894. Ning Xuemo raised her hand to rub her forehead and yawned. After staying up for half the night, she was also tired. She was going to go back to sleep. Just as she was about to turn around, she suddenly sensed something and looked towards a small lake outside the bamboo forest. The small lake was not big and was surrounded by a bamboo forest. There were a few large rocks scattered on the shore, adding a bit of rustic charm to the small lake. On the large rock beside the lake sat a young girl in a lake blue dress. That young girl hugged her knees with her head resting on them. Her long hair draped over her shoulders and fluttered slightly in the wind. Ning Xuema only saw her side profile, but from this side profile, Ning Xuema could tell her identity, Tian Xueching, Ji Yunhuang's future crown prince consort. Ning Xuemo raised her head to look at the sky. Dawn came late in the winter and there was still some time before daybreak. Why did this crown prince consort not sleep in the middle of the night and come here alone? Ning Xuema noticed that Ji Yunhuang treated this future crown prince consort coldly, but this kind of matter was not something that an outsider could interfere with. Therefore she did not ask. Now that she saw Tian Xueching sitting there alone, her back gave people a kind of miserable feeling. It was as if there was a faint sadness and loneliness spreading from her back. She couldn't have jumped into the lake, right? Ning Xuema looked at the lake again. She had been to this lake before and it was not deep. It would not drown anyone. Perhaps she was unhappy, so she came here alone to relieve her boredom? Ning Xuema was not a person who liked to meddle in other people's business. Moreover, she was not familiar with this Miss Tian Xueching. Therefore, she stood there for a moment before turning around to leave. Who is it? Tian Xueching was also a sharp person. She turned around to look in Ning Xuema's direction. Ning Xuema naturally could not leave at this time. She walked out from the shadow of the bamboo forest and smiled. It's me. Her heart skipped a beat. In her previous life, she was extremely proficient in the art of tracking. If she were to follow someone, almost no one would be able to detect her. In this life, her martial arts had improved a lot compared to her previous life. Naturally, her tracking skills had also improved a lot. Even Ji Yunhuang might not be able to detect her presence, but she did not expect that Tian Xueching, who looked so gentle and weak, would be able to detect her so easily. Looks like this Miss Tian Xueching isn't simple either. So it's Martial Uncle Ning. Tian Xueching also stood up and bowed. Her voice was cold and indifferent. It was as cold as her personality. Ning Xuema knew that she was addressing her according to Ji Yunhuang's seniority, so she nodded. I accidentally wandered here and didn't expect to disturb the crown prince consort. My apologies. Tian Xueching lowered her eyes slightly and said indifferently, Martial Uncle Ning is too polite. Martial Uncle Ning, if you don't regard me as an outsider, please call me Xueching by her name. I don't deserve to be called crown prince consort. The two exchanged some pleasantries before Ning Xuema took her leave. Her senses were sharp, so she could tell that this Tian Xueching did not like her. Her attitude towards her was respectful and cold. Although it was strange for Tian Xueching to sit here alone in the middle of the night, Ning Xuema did not ask too much. As long as the other party did not seek death here, she was too lazy to intervene. She walked out of the bamboo forest and turned a corner. Suddenly, she heard voices in front of her. She paused and raised her head to look. From afar, she saw 4 to 5 people walking over. These people were wearing the clothes of the Sun Moon sect's 3rd-generation disciples. There were both men and women, so they were somewhat conspicuous in the night. Chapter 895. Ning Xuemo recognized one of them. It was the Crown Prince Ji Yunhuang. He seemed to have drunk a little too much as he staggered slightly. A young girl followed closely behind him. 3rd senior martial brother, walk slower. It's fine. Ji Yunhuang pushed away the girl's hand. A faint trace of resentment flashed through the girl's eyes, but she smiled slightly. 3rd senior martial brother, why are you in such a hurry? Are you in a hurry to go back and see the crown princess? 3rd senior martial brother, why didn't you bring the crown princess over when you were drinking? You should have let the other disciples get to know her. 5th junior martial sister. Another youth called out to the girl, his tone faintly disapproving. Second senior martial brother, I'm serious. Third senior martial brother brought the crown princess here, but he didn't introduce her to everyone. Everyone wanted to get to know her. The girl retorted. Ji Huang pursed his lips into a line and suddenly looked at the girl. Little fifth, must you mention her? His voice was slightly cold. The other girl smiled and tried to smooth things over. Alright, if third senior martial brother doesn't want to mention her, then we don't need to. Hey, there's a rock over there. Third senior martial brother, be careful. Ji Huang was obviously drunk as he tripped over a rock and staggered. Fortunately, the young girl who had warned him was quick and supported him in a flash. Third senior brother, be careful. She frowned slightly. Third senior martial brother, you really drank too much. Why don't we go to the kitchen and ask for some hangover soup? Fourth senior martial sister, did you forget? Right now it's 2:45 in the morning. The kitchen hasn't opened yet. Fifth junior martial sister reminded him. Fourth senior martial sister patted her forehead and smiled. But I drank until I forgot the time. I actually forgot about this. Third senior martial brother, why don't you come to my place first? I can boil some hangover soup for you. If you go back like this, I'm afraid madam will be unhappy. Ning Shuima didn't want to meet them at this time, so when she saw them clearly, she flew up the tree and wanted to wait for them to pass by before coming down. Once she hit her tracks, it wouldn't be easy for others to find her. Moreover, this group of people already had wine, so they didn't expect someone to be in the tree. They were very daring. They went under the tree and sure enough, they didn't find Ning Shuima hiding in the tree. That's right. Fourth senior sister does have an excellent hangover soup. We all drank a lot of it tonight. Why don't we go there together? Fifth junior sister immediately supported Ji Yunwang's arm from the other side and smiled as she continued. Third senior brother, it's better if you sober up before going back. Otherwise, that crown prince consort of yours will be unhappy and punish you outside the door. Speaking of which, that crown prince consort of yours has quite the character. That day, I spoke to her enthusiastically, but she only replied me with, "Ah, crown prince consort." Ning Shuima sensed something was wrong with her voice. Her heart skipped a beat and she looked towards the source of the sound. She saw that Ji Yunwang's fifth junior sister had stopped, and not far in front of them, a young girl had appeared. It was Tian Xueqing who Ning Shuima had just met by the lake. She was wearing a lake blue dress, her black hair fluttering in the wind, and her beautiful face. The dreary moonlight shone on her body, giving her a sense of loneliness and frailty. Sister-in-law. Crown Prince Consort. Everyone was just talking about this Crown Prince Consort, so when the main character suddenly appeared, they were a little embarrassed. Tian Xueqing's attitude was indifferent as she nodded and greeted them. Hello everyone. Ji Yunhuang steadied himself and swept a glance at her. His voice turned cold. You followed this prince? Ning Shuima couldn't help but facepalm. Did Ji Yunhuang drink until he became stupid? Chapter 896. Ji Yunhuang drank until now and came back. Now that he met his own crown princess, he accused her of following him? She could testify that this crown princess did not follow Ji Yunhuang because she had met her at the lake just now. Ning Shuima leaned against the tree trunk and crossed her arms to watch the show. Your Highness is overthinking. Tian Xueqing's voice was calm. Overthinking. Ji Yunhuang chuckled and his gaze gradually sharpened. Aren't you the best at following me? Tian Xueqing's face turned slightly pale, but she pursed her lips and did not answer. No matter where I go you will appear. Tian Xueqing, must you be so persistent? Ji Yunhuang's eyes flashed with disgust. Tian Xueqing's face turned even paler, but she still did not speak. She paused and stepped forward to support his arm. You drank too much, let me help you back. Scram. Ji Yunhuang, who had always been elegant, suddenly became furious. He fiercely swung his sleeve and a faint light was emitted from his sleeve. Tian Xueqing staggered and retreated a few steps. Tian Xueqing's face turned pale as she looked at Ji Yunhuang. You? Everyone saw that the atmosphere was about to turn stiff and hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Third brother, you really drank too much. How can you treat the crown princess like this? Crown princess, please don't take offense. He drank 3 to 4 jugs of wine today, so he is a bit muddle-headed. That's right, crown princess, please don't take it to heart. Third senior brother hasn't reunited with his fellow disciples for a long time, so he was happy and drank a few more cups. I will apologize to you here, please don't take it to heart. The fourth senior sister also spoke. Aya, third senior brother, so you have a time when you are so rude to others. You scared me. The fifth junior sister seemed to be angry. She took the opportunity to support Ji Yunhuang's arm. Under the moonlight, Tian Xueqing's eyes were like a black pool, which made her face look even paler. These people seemed to be apologizing to her, but they were obviously excluding her. It was obvious that they were in the same circle. While she was outside of it, Tian Xueqing paused and stepped forward again. Her tone was calm and firm. Your Highness, you must return with me. Ji Yunhuang suddenly turned his head to look at the fourth junior sister on his left. Xiaoye, you said that you have hangover soup in your room? Fourth junior sister Xiaoye glanced at Tian Xueqing and said, This? Yes. Good. This prince will go with you. It's been a long time since I drank your hangover soup. I wonder if the taste is still as special as before? Ji Yunhuang didn't even look at Tian Xueqing and pretended to make his decision. All right. Xiaoye agreed readily and smiled apologetically at Tian Xueqing. Crown Prince Consort, third senior martial brother, is very picky when it comes to food. Originally, they all liked to drink the hangover soup made by their younger sister. This time, please let him go temporarily and let him come with me. When he sobers up, how about this little sister personally send him back to your room? Sure, I'll go too. I'll go too. Fifth junior sister immediately signed up. Alright, let's go together. The other two youths looked at each other and said. One of the youths glanced at Tian Xueqing and felt a little apologetic. Crown Prince Consort, why don't you come with us? Tian Xueqing took a step back and lowered her eyes. No need. She turned around and walked away alone. Under the moonlight, her back was straight, which made her figure seem even more desolate. She walked very quickly and disappeared at the end of the small path in just a moment. Third brother, your Crown Prince Consort seems to be quite skilled. One of the youths couldn't help but say when he saw Tian Xueqing's figure disappear. Chapter 897. Ji Yunhuang didn't say anything, but his eyes flickered and his handsome face turned gloomy. It was obvious that he didn't want anyone to mention this crown princess. Yet was a considerate person and immediately said, All right, let's go to my place. Humph, with 4 drunken cats gone, I'm going to make a big pot of soup. The group of people chatted and laughed as they left. Ning Xuema sat on the tree branch and lazily rested her chin on her hand as she pondered. The way Ji Yunhuang and Tian Xueqing interacted with each other was very abnormal. What exactly happened between them? How did it end up like this? Furthermore, Ji Yunhuang's 2 junior sisters obviously harbored some special feelings for Ji Yunhuang. Moreover, both of them seemed to be quite scheming. Especially that her words were like a needle hidden in cotton. If he were to bring her back to the palace, she would definitely be an expert in the palace's infighting. No wonder people said that Ji Yunhuang's admirers were all over the world. It seemed that it was true. Fortunately, he was going to ascend the throne in the future and could have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards and 72 concubines. These women's wishes might not be disappointed. However, this Tian Xueqing's temperament was cold and she looked a little naive. With her temperament, would she be able to keep her position as the empress in the harem? Furthermore, Ji Yunhuang hated her so much. This girl's fate was really worrying. Sigh. She sighed softly. Why are you sighing out of nowhere? A voice suddenly sounded from behind her. Ning Xuema was startled. She was leaning on a small tree branch and this shock caused her body to sway and she almost fell down. An arm wrapped around her waist in time. Be careful. Ning Xuema abruptly turned her head. Her nose almost bumped into the other party's nose. She hurriedly tilted her head back and looked at the ancestor who had appeared behind her at an unknown time. When did you arrive? Not long ago. The ancestor's reply was always concise. Ning Xuema looked at the ancestor's arm that was wrapped around her waist and thought about the plate of pastries that had gone into his stomach. She felt that anger coming out again and her charming face turned cold. She struggled in his arms. Let go of me. Shinjuli readily agreed. Okay. Sure enough, he immediately let go of his arm. Ning Xuema was caught off guard. She struggled a little harder and fell down with a whoosh. Fortunately, her kung fu was quite good now. She somersaulted in the air and landed lightly on the ground. As soon as she landed, she immediately turned and left. She walked for a full 3 to 4 miles before she stopped and looked back. The road was vast and boundless and no one was chasing after her. For some reason, a sense of disappointment rose in his heart. She pursed her lips and sat down on a stone bench by the roadside. A strange feeling of grievance rose in her heart. Strange, is it time for my period? Something's wrong with my mood. Why was he so easily angered? She rubbed the space between her eyebrows and hugged her knees as she stared at the stars. The sky was filled with stars. Looking at the stars in the sky in this world didn't seem to be any different from her original world. The Milky Way, the Big Dipper. Hanging in the sky, she was reminded of her own world. Other people had transmigrated because of some accident, but she had transmigrated after a nap. It was really strange. She didn't know what had happened to her own body. Had she become a sleeping beauty or a vegetable? Or had she died and entered the crematorium? Chapter 898. Ning Xuema's diehard friends and subordinates must be astonished and shocked when they saw her body, right? If she was in a vegetative state, maybe someone would tell her bedside stories to stimulate her brain and wait for her to wake up. She had transmigrated in her sleep. She didn't know if she would also transmigrate in her sleep one day. Maybe when she woke up in the other world, everything here would be a dream. But her dream was a bit too long. Since she couldn't remember her dreams, everything here would probably dissipate in her mind, and she wouldn't have any impression at all. What Dizun, what Sun Moon sect, what Crown Prince. They were all just fleeting clouds. She was still the boss of her own secret service, leading a group of subordinates to go through fire and water. At this moment, her thoughts drifted thousands of miles away. Are the stars beautiful? Dizun's cold voice sounded beside her again. Yes, they are beautiful. Ning Xuema answered without thinking. She obviously hadn't pulled her thoughts back. She had always liked to look at the stars. Unfortunately, when she was in the modern world, the neon lights in the city blurred the stars, and the feeling of tranquility was missing. She would occasionally go to the mountains. At night, when there was no one in the mountains, looking at the vast sky filled with stars would calm her impetuous heart. Dizun looked at her and saw that her eyes were still staring at the stars, as if she was in a trance. Obviously, she didn't realize who was sitting next to her. It was the first time Shinjuli had been ignored so thoroughly. His eyes flashed slightly. What are you thinking about? His voice had a strange hypnotic taste, like a hypnotist, making people want to tell him the truth. Ning Xuema was still in a mental state, so naturally she wasn't on guard. She subconsciously opened her mouth. I arrived here in a daze while I was sleeping. Perhaps everything that is happening right now is just a dream. When I wake up, I will return to my own world and forget everything that happened in this world. Dream? Forget. Shinjuli's eyes darkened. Forget about me too? The most regretful thing in my life is that I can't remember my dreams at all. I can't remember any of my dreams. No matter how colorful or bloody my dreams are, as long as I wake up, I can't remember anything. Ning Xuema pursed her lips in distress. She had the strongest brain, super memory, and super analytical ability, but she couldn't remember any dreams. Could it be that God realized she was too smart, so he gave her a small flaw? Didn't he want her to be so perfect? Just as she finished speaking, she felt a sudden pain in her palm, as if she had been pricked by a needle. She shuddered and suddenly came back to her senses. Only then did she realize that it was the ancestor who had been sitting beside her and chatting with her for a while. Her eyelashes trembled as if she had seen a ghost. You're scaring me again. Why are you stabbing me? It was so painful. Shinjuli looked down at her and said seriously, I didn't appear and disappear mysteriously. I appeared by your side openly. You didn't realize it. As for stabbing you, well, did it hurt? Ning Xuema glared at him fiercely. Of course it hurt. If you don't believe me, let me stab you. Until now, her palm was still burning. Shinjuli's lips seemed to have a flash of a smile. He raised his hand and rubbed her head. It's good that you know it hurts. It proves that this isn't a dream. It doesn't hurt to be pricked in a dream. I just want to prove to you that you're not dreaming. Chapter 899. Ning Xuema couldn't help but slap his hand away. She naturally knew that this wasn't a dream, she had transmigrated. Although the process of transmigrating was a bit thunderous, she looked at the ancestor's jade-like hand that was placed on her knee. Without thinking, she grabbed it and fiercely bit it. Shinjuli was stunned by her childish behavior. His eyes flickered, but he did not say anything and allowed her to bite him. Her small teeth bit down on his hand and the tip of her tongue touched his skin. In addition to the pain, there was also an indescribable itch that seemed to go straight to his heart. Ning Xuema loosened her bite and looked at the deep teeth marks on the back of his hand. Her bite was a bit heavy and almost made him bleed. How is it? Does it hurt? Ning Xuema finally got her revenge and looked at him with a proud expression. It hurts a bit. Shenjuli looked at her bright eyes and honestly said, It's good that you know it hurts. It proves that you aren't dreaming. Ning Xuema's eyes curved like crescent moons. She returned his words back to him. I never thought that I was dreaming. Your proof doesn't make sense. Shenjuli looked at the teeth marks on his hand and then looked at her. Ning Xuema snorted, Then I'll just treat it as me proving that I'm not dreaming. You also know that it hurts when I bite you. It proves that you're also real. Shenjuli. He looked at the 2 rows of teeth marks on his hand and then looked at her small mouth. Your teeth are very beautiful. The 2 rows of teeth marks were very neat. Ning Xuemo revealed her small white teeth and proudly said, Of course, not only are my teeth beautiful, every part of my body is beautiful. She was very satisfied with her small body. Of course, this was with the exception of the fate of being a calamitous star. Shenjuli suddenly reached out and pulled her over. He let her sit on his knee and lowered his head to kiss her. It really is beautiful. Let me take a closer look. It was a long and intimate kiss. Ning Xuema was gasping for breath. She wanted to push him away but couldn't. Xuema discovered that his kissing technique was becoming more and more proficient. The first time he kissed her, he was as stiff as a young chick. When his lips collided with hers, her teeth hurt a little. But now he didn't have that awkward feeling anymore. Every kiss was deep. His body carried a kind of cool floral fragrance, which made her lose herself in an instant. His kiss this time was a bit special as he used his tongue to brush her teeth. Then he let go of Ning Xuema's lips. It's really good. His forehead was still against Xuema's forehead. Their breaths intertwined and warmth spread between the 2 peopleses. Ning Xuema's heart was beating like a drum. She looked at him who was so close to her. Great God, are you pursuing me? This kind of casual kissing was not how a master would treat his disciple. Shenjuli raised his eyebrows. You just realized it now? Ning Xuema pushed him slightly away. But I'm your disciple now, not your concubine? You can't just kiss me and go downstairs as you wish. Yes, is there a difference? Whether it's a concubine or a disciple, isn't it always you? Shenjuli's expression didn't change. Ning Xuema couldn't help but rub her eyebrows. But a master-disciple relationship is taboo. Since you want to pursue me, you shouldn't take me as your disciple. What was the Almighty thinking? Ning Xuema felt that she couldn't understand the Almighty's brain circuit. For me, any taboo is not taboo. Besides, isn't there a master-disciple relationship? Shenjuli replied disapprovingly. Chapter 900. Besides, you seem to be quite interested in the relationship between a master and his disciple. You made me up so well. Shenjuli rested his chin on her hair and answered lazily. Hey, when did I make you up? Ning Xuema was not convinced. She raised her head to look at him. But when she raised her head, her lips touched his beautifully curved chin, and he immediately lowered his head and kissed her lips. Then he unceremoniously sold out Kirin. Little Apple said it. Ning Xuema was speechless. That big mouth. She had only said a few words. Kirin, who was recuperating in a large lake full of spiritual energy, suddenly sneezed and spurted out a column of water. It scratched its nose with its claws. What's going on? Who was speaking ill of it behind its back? Ning Xuema suddenly had an idea. Just because you heard Little Apple say that I made you up about the relationship between a master and his disciple, you just decided to make it true on me? You're very smart. Shenjuli praised her, implicitly admitting this point. Ning Xuema was speechless. This great god really took revenge for the smallest grievance. This revenge was unique. So, he was willing to accept her as his disciple for this, for the relationship between a master and his disciple. She couldn't help but push him and said with a straight face, Your interests are really special. You made an exception to accept me as your disciple this time just to satisfy your interests? It's not entirely for fun. Your martial arts are too ordinary, so I want to train you personally. Who in this world can help you level up quickly than me, your master? Shenjuli told her his plan. My martial arts aren't bad anymore. Ning Xuemo raised her eyebrows. I'm already at Earth Stage Level 2. Who could level up as fast as her? If this level was placed outside, she could do whatever she wanted. That's right, Earth Stage Level 2. You're the lowest level among all my disciples. Shenjuli attacked her self-esteem. Ning Xuemo raised her chin. I'm a fast learner. I'll be able to level up very soon. Oh, I'll wait and see. Shenjuli hugged her even tighter. He had never been so eager for someone to level up so quickly. Ning Xuema was about to say something when she suddenly sensed something. She looked towards the small path not far away and saw 6 patrolling Sun Moon sect disciples hurriedly walking over. Ning Xuema's heart sank. She couldn't help but look back at Shinjoli, who was hugging her. Your grand disciple is here. Do you want a flash? Shinjoli raised his eyebrows and seemed a little surprised. Why do I have to dodge when they come? You're not wearing a mask. Ning Xuema couldn't help but remind him. More importantly, he was hugging her. If anyone saw the master and disciple hugging and chatting here, it would probably be explosive news after dawn. I don't want to wear a mask in front of you. The ancestor replied casually. But Ning Xuema started to push him away. She started to pull his hands that were wrapped around her slender waist. However, his hands were tightly clasped and she couldn't pull them away. Grand Marshal Uncle? Greetings, Grand Marshal Uncle. The group of disciples moved very quickly. In the blink of an eye, they were in front of Ning Xuema and Shinjoli. They all bowed to greet her. Ning Xuema. She raised her head stiffly, expecting to see shock and other emotions on their faces. However, she didn't expect that they didn't have any shock. There was only a little surprise in their eyes. One of them couldn't help but ask, is Grand Marshal Uncle not feeling well? He saw Ning Xuema sitting there alone with her hands fidgeting around her waist. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.